Supervisors, please take your seats. If you'll join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call of supervisors, please. Looks as though we have everyone in attendance, which should be good for all we have on the agenda, right? 28 in attendance. First order of business this evening is a couple of opportunities to recognize some very deserving people in Kenosha County, and one individual in particular who has been instrumental in all that's gone on here in Kenosha County in the court system for a very long time. So with that, I'm going to ask Judge Kluka to come forward, please, if she would, and the county executive as well. Judge, again, welcome and congratulations on what is a well-deserving retirement, forthcoming retirement. It's a great pleasure for me to read an official proclamation for you this evening because, as you know, the district I first represented was the district you currently live in, a neighborhood that my family was in for some 60 years, and if I recall, you and my father grew up together in that neighborhood. So he made it very clear I had to extend his wishes to you this evening, and I certainly am glad to do it.
But not at the same time.
No, but not at the same time. That's correct. I'm going to read a proclamation here today from the County Executive Cruiser, as well as myself as County Board Chairman, by the Judge Barbara A. Kluka Day, and how appropriate that is. And if we had the opportunity to do more, I would assume we would get the support to do that. But nonetheless, whereas Judge Barbara A. Kluka is about to conclude a distinguished career as Kenosha County Circuit Court Judge after loyally serving the citizens of Kenosha County for 22 years, and whereas born in Kenosha to Matthew and Justine Kluka, Barbara Kluka attended Kenosha schools and began her career as a teacher before earning her law degree from Marquette University in 1978. And whereas after graduating, she returned to Kenosha as an assistant district attorney until 1980, when she began working in the private practice of law. In 1984, she took on the additional role of Circuit Court Commissioner, and whereas on April 4th, 1989, Judge Kluka was elected Circuit Court Judge, the first female judge in Kenosha County history. She served as Chief Judge of the 2nd Judicial District from 1996 to 2002, and has served on many state and local court-related committees throughout her career. And whereas Judge Kluka has been very involved in the community, serving on the Gateway College Court and Conference Advisory Committee, St. Joseph High School Board, Southeast Wisconsin Boy Scout Advisory Council, as a sponsor mentor for local college students, and as lector and a Eucharistic minister at St. Anthony Church my wife and I were married in, by the way. Whereas leaving the bench on August 31st, 2011, Judge Kluka will be remembered for her many contributions to the judicial process, as well as her leadership, not only locally, but also district-wide and statewide. She will be missed by all. Now, therefore, we, Jim Cruiser, Kenosha County Executive, and Mark Molinaro, Jr., Kenosha County Board Chairman, together with the Kenosha County Board of Supervisors, do hereby proclaim Thursday, August 25th, 2011, as Judge Barbara A. Kluka Day in the County of Kenosha, and we urge the citizens of Kenosha County to show their appreciation to Judge Barbara A. Kluka for her many years of dedicated service to the citizens of Kenosha County and her immeasurable contributions to our community. We wish her continued success and happiness in her retirement. I will add in great health going forward. Given this 23rd day of August 2011, Jim Cruiser, Kenosha County Executive, Mark Molinaro, Jr., Kenosha County Board Chairman. Judge, congratulations.
It's nice having the legislative, the executive branch honor the judicial branch. And thank you for your years of service. You've been wonderful to work with, and our community thanks you so much. We would like to hear from you.
Absolutely. I'd be disappointed if you didn't ask. Chairman Molinaro, County Executive Cruiser, Chief Judge Wagner, who is also present this evening. I thank you for this great honor and privilege. And indeed, a privilege and honor it was to serve as a judge in Kenosha County over these past 22 years. But I will tell you that one of the things that made it such a wonderful experience is the cooperation and communication that has always existed between and among the courts, the county board, and the county executive's office. I can tell you that as someone who has worked and traveled throughout the state in my capacity as a judge, serving on various committees, there were many, many times that people from other parts of the state would say, well, how could you ever get your county board to do that? And how could you ever get your county executive to do that? And I didn't have an answer for them because it all seemed so natural. It seemed like the proper order of things for the executive, the legislative, and the judicial branches of government here in Kenosha County to cooperate and work together for the good of the citizens who have entrusted our respective jobs to us. So I thank you very much for this honor. It has been indeed an honor and privilege.
Let's give it up for the judge.
We'll stay right here for this. We'll stay right here and drop things. We have yet another recognition this evening, and I'm going to ask the Kenosha Cyclones girls team to come forward as I talk, and the coaches. Coaches, come on up. We have before us today the 14 and under blue team of the Kenosha Cyclones. Does that mean there's another color team? But they're not quite as good, I trust. Is that right? And we have yet another certificate of recognition. And as I read it, I want to impress upon these girls what you heard as we read the proclamation for Judge Kluka, who not only was born and raised here in Kenosha and left the community to get her education and decided after that to bring her strengths and her commitment back to her hometown community. And I hope all of you who no doubt will go on to great college careers somewhere will keep in mind that Kenosha County needs leaders and needs great individuals and certainly young women to come back and do all they can to help our community continue to grow. So I want you to keep that in mind going forward. In the meantime, certificate of recognition presented to the Kenosha Cyclones 14 and under blue team. Whereas the Kenosha community is proud of the Kenosha Cyclones 14 and under blue team that captured the NAFA Grand National Championship at Westchester Park in Omaha, Nebraska, held July 21st to July 24th, posting a perfect 8-0 record in the 23-team event. And whereas the Kenosha Cyclones Fast Pitch Club, formed in 2002, is a leading fast pitch softball organization in Wisconsin as well as the country. Striving for dedication and commitment to fast pitch softball, the organization provides players with the opportunity to travel and participate with some of the state's best players in some of the most competitive tournaments. And whereas the Cyclones 14 and under blue team, led by head coach Dwayne Kilby, assuming these are the gentlemen with us right now, and assistant coach Tony Ellingson, consists of, I should have read this beforehand, so I'll butcher your names, but that's all right. Let's see. Consists of Cassidy Cortendick, Cheyenne Cortendick, Cindy Garces, thank you, keep whispering, Courtney Ellingson, Courtney Reeves, Carly Lang, Kerrigan Coach, Corey Grasso, Maddie Kilby, Maggie Garlick, and Samantha Carey. Not too bad. I got most of them right. Whereas by defeating South Dakota Fusion for the second time in 2 days, the Kenosha Cyclones 14 Blue won the first national championship in the 10-year history of the Kenosha Cyclones program. And whereas the Kenosha Cyclones 14U Blue team's accomplishments and winning attitude are a source of pride not only for their families, but the entire Kenosha County community. Now, therefore, we, Jim Cruiser, Kenosha County Executive, and Mark Molinaro Jr., County Board Chairman, together with the County Board of Supervisors, do hereby present this certificate of recognition to the members of the Kenosha Cyclones 14 and under Blue Team in recognition and appreciation of their hard work and determination in capturing the 2011 NAFA Grand National Championships. We're extremely proud of their achievements and are honored to proclaim them as true and model representatives of our community. Given his 23rd day of August 2011, Jim Cruiser, Kenosha County Executive, Mark Molinaro Jr., Kenosha County Board Chairman. Ladies, congratulations.
You know, we spend over $8 million a year on young people who make the wrong decisions. I'd like to thank your parents, your coaches, and you for having the ethics, the work ethic, and the value you put on competitive sports. It'll make you winners through your whole life. We're very proud of you as a community to win a national championship. That doesn't happen very often. And for all the travel and everything you've done. And we congratulate you representing Kenosha County. Well done.
Anything you want to say, Coach?
It's all downhill from here, right? All right, let's see. Citizens' comments. At this time, we will open up the meeting to citizen comments. You will have 5 minutes to address the board. Please approach the microphone if you're interested in speaking. State your name and address for the record. Speak directly into the microphone if you would.
David Buellen, 24607 67th Street. That's my 4th time talking. I'm getting to feel everybody almost on a first-name basis. Maybe I'll ask you over for a barbecue sometime, but enough of that. This is on the mandatory overtime. I'm kicking that can again. I can give you 100 reasons why not to have this mandatory overtime for the highway department. But what I haven't heard is one good reason why you want to have it. I know Act 10 gave you the longevity to do stuff to us. We may not all agree with it, but we're all working through it and stuff. I consider us family. We're here for the public. We're here for you. The highway department will always be there for the public. That's why I'm asking you as board to please remove that mandatory overtime language from that resolution tonight, because as I stated, we'll be there for you. We'll be there for the public as we have in the past. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other citizen comments? I'm going to ask you if you would to queue up at the microphone, please. Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Hello, my name is Peter Ress. Address is 558 11th Place, Kenosha, Wisconsin. And dear board members, I appear before the county board today to request, and I'm referring to item 46 in the agenda. I request that the cabaret license be denied to Club Climax. The principal reason that this license should be denied is based upon real concerns regarding the safety, health, and welfare of the general population, including noise and crowd disturbances for area residents. But first and foremost, the club does not meet the standards set forth in Section F of the statute governing cabaret licenses, which states, adequate parking, and if deemed necessary by the Sheriff's Department for safety reasons, lighted parking facilities shall be maintained so as to accommodate anticipated capacities. Now, the posted capacity for this club is 93 people, but per the determination of Cecchini Asphalt LLC, the parking lot can accommodate only 16 cars. Staff alone will take up at least 2 to 4 spots, leaving even less spots available to patrons. Clearly, this is not adequate to accommodate anticipated capacities. The club also does not have any marked parking, which is a violation of the ordinance, let alone any handicap parking spaces. Kenosha County Municipal Ordinance, Section 12.13(3), sub A, sub 9, also requires bars, coffee shops, restaurants, clubs, lounges, and places of entertainment, 1 space for each 100 square feet of floor area, plus 1 space for each 2 employees of the largest work shift. So 3 bartenders plus 3 bouncers will further limit available parking for any patrons. Additionally, there are no lights in the parking lot, nor is there any signage to indicate where the entrance and exit is located. There's also no signage indicating even the name of the club. I hope that the board would acknowledge this deficiency in lighting and adequate parking and deny a cabaret license based on the language outlined in the statute. The language of the statute is quite clear in this respect, and I respectfully request the board recognize and uphold the law. This area of Sheridan Road is dangerous under the best of conditions. I have personally witnessed a half dozen or so near misses, one involving a motorcyclist on Highway 32, as drivers seeking the entrance to the club slow down dramatically, causing the following vehicles to lock up their brakes to avoid collisions. Clearly, this is a public safety issue, and I believe it's the duty of the county board to protect the health and well-being of people, pedestrians, and residents in the area. And recently, there have been a number of serious accidents on Sheridan Road, including 3 fatalities. And I would like the board to keep this, take this into consideration as well. Increased traffic flow into an area with improper lighting and no clear signage is an invitation for more fatalities. Now, a recommendation was made to grant them a license by the Kenosha County Law and Judiciary Committee based on information provided by the Sheriff's Department, which said their initial estimate was that the parking lot could accommodate between 35 and 40 parking spots.
Sir, I'm going to ask you to wrap up in 30 seconds, please.
30 seconds. Well, okay. In any event, I do have the estimate saying there's 16 parking spots, not 30. And Captain Larry Apkers said he does stand corrected on this. He didn't look far enough in the ordinance. They overestimated the number of spaces available, and he will stipulate to that fact. So in any event, based on these parking issues, I do respectfully request that this cabaret license be denied based on clear language of the law, and thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Ress.
Good evening. Mark Montague, 7835 36th Avenue. Like our previous speaker spoke, we're here for the same reason on the policy amendments, trying to get some things done. All right, let's start with what we know. At a Parks and Highway Committee meeting at the beginning of the month, Dennis Alverman asked about the standard workday being 7 to 3:30. The question was posed to Gary Sipsma, our director, asked, is there going to be any changes? Answer, no, there would be, it would stay the same. We now know when we see the policies that has changed for whatever reason. Also, last Finance and Administration meeting, I have to bring this up because I really have concerns about money that the county is spending. Joe Clark couldn't even bring up out loud what the money that was still going from golf operations out the back door. That's some serious business. We need to take care of it. I would love to see the golf courses do what they need to do, is break even. We don't even have the number anymore. That's not really the way I know Joe wants to run things. I know him better than that. No seniority now. This is getting directly to the policy. Last year, I lost my job. I was one of the people that had their job disconnected through the state. thanks to bumping rights, I had the ability to stay at work. I guess 23 years means nothing now. Now they'll keep anyone they need to, and your time here doesn't matter. I guess if management doesn't like the people personnel are sending them, they should probably do a better job at hiring. But oops, we've got a temp service now. We don't even need to interview people. You want to talk about a hostile work environment? The county created it, not Act 10. If you want to hear some actual numbers, ask the 14 that got laid off last year, or ask the 9 that were dropped $7 an hour in pay. Act 10 wasn't even close to being passed then. It was still something on somebody's agenda. Now tack on the loss of overtime. What do you think our roads are going to look like? Something about daily assignments. I know we have some issues with truck assignments. If you go to the circus, elephants grab onto the tail in front of them to negotiate between areas where they need to be secure. It's basically what our trucks do for 8 hours a day out in traffic. I've asked you guys time and time again to come to work, to see what we do, to see what we're up against. Joe Clark has been the only one to step forward now showing up on a job. The roster sheets that we do our assignments from make our daily work easier. They're set up by seniority. Trucks go out as fast as possible in the mornings because the person who's assigned to that truck knows what happened to the truck the day before and is good to go. And it's all about efficiency, not who we need to have in a vehicle or run a piece of equipment. The mandatory overtime right now for our number from last year, it's 80%. Last month I sat through a daycare center in here when you guys were all fired up and there was 8 supervisors missing. Are you guys subject to mandatory overtime? 8 of you were gone and this place looked like a playground. I'm going to bring up Joe Clark's name again. He stopped out on a job and I've been begging you all to come to see. I have to defend Joe. I know maybe he's not on our side, but I have to respect him. He's up front with you, and he's trying to do the best job he can. He was even appalled at the policy meeting when we got to the portion that had to do with the highway department's policy changes. Everybody got all upset. There were motions made. Corp Council said that we are not negotiating, and all of a sudden it turned into a free-for-all. When we got to the highway department amendments, I'll finish this up, Mark, thank you. I guess it was time to go home. My last statement, I go out to the brothers and sisters at 990J. Hang tough, we won't let you down. At least they have a communicator and a leader in the department. Sheriff Dave Beth may have laid the original line out a little rough to the jailers, but he came to the policy meeting with an OT policy that now at least you have some ideas to work with. At the highway department, we are absent of leadership, and our head is a divider, not a unifier. We need a builder of trust. Now we go in our busiest season with attitudes and many questions. We're not going away.
Thank you.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Danielle Palmer, and my address is 6016 33rd Avenue. I'm here on behalf of my boss, Lisa Patterson and Angela Hale. I'm a manager over at Club Climax. The issues that the gentleman had brought up earlier about the parking lot and adequate parking, I have a gentleman coming by the name of Ralph that is going to look at the parking lot and he's going to draw in the lines. We are actually in accommodation and trying to compromise with our neighbors. We are looking to change the name of Climax. So that is why we do not have a sign. We have a meeting already set up with We Energies to come and set up 2 more lights, one in the front and one in the back, so that we can have better lighting. We do have adequate lighting right now, but we want it brighter, just for our own personal sake. I have already mentioned before in the past that if anybody does have any questions from our neighbors, that they come and talk to us. Other than that, we are not trying to have this be a party bar, okay? We want it to be calm and quiet. Pretty much what we've had so far, the neighbors that just walk over, they know it used to be the old Sands. They just want to check out, see the place, what we're doing with it, hear our ideas, what we have going on. We want to get a few rock bands in there, top 40 DJs. We don't want, everybody's welcome, but we don't want the bad crowd there, I guess you could say. You know, we are doing our best to keep everybody out of there. Adequate parking is up to 32 spaces, and our capacity is 92 persons. We have a huge backyard to be able to, you know, have events and stuff. It is not against rules and regulations and the law of Kenosha to rent out space from the Red Oak Motel across the parking way to rent out parking space in case anything like that ever does happen, where we do have an event and there is, you know, more people than we would have on a normal day where there is no event, you know, 15, 20 cars in the parking lot. So we are doing everything we can to the best of our ability. I thank you very much.
Thank you.
David Hinterberg, 518 Fellows Road. I work for the Highway Department. We all know why we're here. I think you guys heard all our complaints and our, whatever you want to call it. But I think what you haven't heard is what kind of people we have at the Highway Department. I've been in construction most of my life, operating heavy equipment. This is the most diverse group of people I've ever worked with. We got electricians, carpenters, tree guys, masons, concrete finishers, heavy equipment operators, truck drivers. There isn't a thing that this highway department can't do for the public. And when it comes to plowing snow, it's the most efficient group I've ever seen, and safe. I'd put our safety record up against any county in this state. You want a mandatory overtime? You don't need it. Like Mark said, it's 80%. You want 10 guys, you make 12 phone calls. I don't know what else to say. It's an asset to this county and the taxpayers of this county that you have a good group of people working here that's efficient. We do our jobs well, and we're dedicated at doing our jobs. I don't know how many of you have given up Christmases all your life. We don't have normalcy in the wintertime because we're on call. I've been at the Highway Department 15 years. I've given up 8 Christmases with my family. I'm not complaining. That's what I signed up for. I think just about every one of them have done the same thing. I think all we want is fair. A work day that we can count on, and a job that we like to come to, and good people we work with, and to do a good job for the citizens of the Kenosha County. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Nick Kasmer. I live at 6517 94th Avenue in Kenosha, Wisconsin. I'm here to talk on the policies before the board again tonight. I first want to thank the Finance and Administration Committee for the ability to speak on behalf of the employees last week. There were quite a few amendments made by that committee, and I want to thank that committee again for those. The majority of them were good for the employees. However, there's still a couple amendments that we'd like to see the board take up tonight. The first, I think, is a fairly easy one. On the first page of the Department of Public Works policy, at the bottom, there's a reference to the selection for second shift operation. It reads, selection employees interested in working second shift will be based on years of service in descending order from the most years of service to the least. I think it would be better if that section simply read that volunteers will be sought on the basis of seniority, and employees will be forced on the basis of inverse seniority, meaning that employees will first be asked by seniority if they want to do the second shift, and if there are insufficient volunteers, then you can force based on inverse seniority. That's the way it works now. I think that was the intention of the committee. I think that's more of a cleanup than it is a change. The second issue we'd like to see a change on is seniority for layoffs and bumping. Specifically, if you need a layoff in either the jail or the highway, and you just need one less person gone, it's the least senior person. You need a layoff in a specific position or a specific classification, then it's the least senior person in that specific position or classification. That person would then have the ability to bump a least senior person in another classification as long as they had more seniority. I think that's a simple way to do it. As Mark stated, I think 23 years of service or 20 years of service should count for something here. The third change would be regarding the overtime. For the jail, what's being proposed now is 171 hours of work in a 28-day period would result in overtime for the correctional officers. They work 160 hours in each 28-day pay period based on their schedule as it stands right now. They have a screwy schedule in the way that it works, but I went through the schedule for a period of, I think, about 4 to 6 months, and it's true that every pay period, every 28 days, is 160 hours. So under the FLSA, they'd have to work 11 hours of straight time before they start getting paid at time and a half. And a simple amendment to that is what was brought from the administration committee initially, which is a time and a half outside of an 8-hour workday or time and a half on days not scheduled. Or another possibility is time and a half after 160 hours worked in a 28-day period. For the highway, we're asking for time and a half outside of 8 hours of work, as well as time and a half on weekends. That would, any issues with mandatory overtime would then be gone because there's an incentive, of course, for people to come into work, and that's a system that's gone on here earlier, and it's worked. People have come into work. Benefit time's already been taken care of by the committee, by the administration committee, so we'd like to see that kept. The fourth change we are looking for is regarding the grievance procedure. We'd like to see the full impartial hearing officer be applied to all disciplines. There's an amendment on that coming before the board, but we don't think it goes far enough. I don't think it's within the letter of the law. We'd also like to see the impartial hearing officer specifically set forth in the policy, be it a member of the WERC who has said that they will do these, be it a retired member of the WERC, be it a retired judge, be it an ad hoc arbitrator. 30 seconds. The last thing that we'd like to see changed is the truck assignment for the highway, specifically have that done based on seniority. I think that's a safety issue, and I think it's a smart issue. I don't think we're asking for a lot here. I'd ask the board to please consider these issues when they take them up tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name's Jim Dowell, 24020 77th Street, Paddock Lake. On the subject of assigned vehicles for the highway department, the thought has come up that maybe some of you may misunderstand how that works a little bit. Assigned vehicles, when a person's assigned to it and they are not there or they've already worked their legal amount of hours, that vehicle does not sit then. That vehicle has someone put into it, and many times these vehicles during a storm run 24 hours a day, checked over in between each driver. But just because they're assigned to one person generally does not mean they sit when that person's not here. So those vehicles can go out and do go out often. The safety concern of that is a good thing with someone being assigned to that vehicle is being that they drive it majority of the time. They're familiar with the rattles and things that are an issue and things that aren't an issue. They can tell by the way it's ran for all the time they've had it. So having assigned vehicles is a good thing in a lot of different ways. And then that person takes pride in that vehicle when they're assigned to it also and keeps it in a lot nicer condition. The other thing I want to speak on is the same thing as last time, the mandatory overtime. The decision you make on that subject affects several lives. I would like to know why the couple of people that are so horribly inconvenienced by dialing some extra phone numbers aren't here with all of their evidence defending their want for such a controlling rule. We have proof to show there isn't a problem. This is nothing more than an attempt to gain control over people's lives. At the start of all this, a year and a half ago, we were told in a meeting out at the highway garage that with all this budget cut and everything else, that we're all in this together, we were told by the higher-ups. Well, apparently it stopped there. It meant that we're all in the same room together, I guess, because ever since then, their wages haven't been cut, which is a lot of times 1.5 times our wages. And but we're taking all the heat on this. The last thing I'd like to say is when you're voting on these amendments tonight, I'd like to have you all follow God's rule, and as to do unto others as you would want have done unto you. Thank you.
Again, I'm going to ask, it's 5 minutes, so if you want to wait a couple minutes in and then queue up, I would appreciate it. As you know, we've got a full agenda this evening. Yes, sir.
Dave Holtz, 4314 47th Avenue. I left off 2 weeks ago with a mission statement for this highway division. Our product, in my mind, is safe passage, and I would like to continue providing that in this county. And the current work conditions, as have been mentioned by my brothers, it's not conducive to that. Act 10 does not say anywhere in it, please throw the baby out with the bathwater. The old contract is now null and void, I get that, but there were still some parts that are still good. That would be the baby. There's no reason to knock seniority into the ground except, like was mentioned, to beat the tar out of the employees. My side lost. I get it. It's over. My side lost. I'm just asking for a truce. You know, I can do a better job when I'm not down in the corner being kicked in the stomach every day. I just want a little leadership. I want an opportunity, like I said 2 weeks ago, to continue to value my job. I've enjoyed it for 19 years. Maybe it's time for a change. That's for me to decide later, but right now I still have to do a job. I still need to provide for my family, and I voted down a contract a year and a half ago because I was looking out for my family. And I defy anyone in this room to do differently. I would wager a bet that everyone in this room, when asked, would ask for all they could to take care of their homes, their land, and their family. It's that simple. I had to write up a truck last week. Now, I'm assigned 174. It's a triaxle. We were paving. We had finished on O. We had driveways to do, so I was temporarily assigned 161. It's a tandem. It's a little smaller, a lot more maneuverable. I wrote up 7 different items on this one truck, and I bring this truck up for a simple reason. Steve Rudolph used to run this truck. He's now retired, and he wouldn't have retired if it weren't for all the things going on recently. I don't blame him for leaving. But that truck has become what I think of as an abandoned house. And I don't know why this is, but as soon as a house sits empty, all of a sudden stuff's falling off it. And that's what this truck looks like. It's only been 8 months, and 8 months ago, and I am not making this up, it was not a brand new truck. It was one of the finest trucks we had in our fleet. He was meticulous. He took care of everything, washed it all the time. Any free moment he had, if he wasn't assigned something, he took time to work on his truck. And a number of us do that. We don't stand around waiting to be told to make our truck clean or to make sure it's in good working order. And to see the state of that truck now is disgusting. I guess that's all I got tonight. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to address the board?
Good evening. I was going to congratulate the judge, but she left, so I'll put it in the record that I'd like to congratulate her for her service. My name is Sarah Schultz. My husband is a Kenosha County Detention Center worker. The policies
address please for the record.
P.O. Box 549, Pell Lake, Wisconsin.
Thank you.
The policies that you're going to be voting on tonight is going to affect the majority of people in this room. When you vote on these policies, I want you to think about, would this be a place that you would want to work? These policies that you're going to be implementing for these people. Is this a place that you would want to work at? You want to stay at? Is this a place that you want to keep like tenure at? It's hard enough to find good workers, especially now that the collective bargaining has been taken away. It's hard enough to keep workers in a jail. It's hard enough to find people to want to work the hours and not have the holidays, not have that time with their family. I don't know how many times that we have made plans and they've had to be canceled because my husband had to be forced. That's part of the job requirement. We get that. How hard is it to make those plans? How hard is it to see family? How many of you would go through that same thing? 171 hours before you get overtime? What if you need that overtime to make payments on your house because your spouse or your partner has lost their job? What if you're constantly late on your rent or your mortgage? What happens then? If you have to work 11 extra hours a month to make that, what if you're out of a house then? You still have a job, but how good is that? There's got to be a little bit of give on your part. You are elected by us. You work for us. We don't work for you. When you vote on this, think about if these are the policies that you would want to work with. And are these the policies that you would want your officials that you elected to be voting on? And would you vote for those elected officials again? Because that's the choice that we are given tonight when you make these policy changes, the interim policy changes. We have to look at, will we want to have these type of votes? Do we want to have these people who are taking away our rights and taking away the things that we barely have? Do we want them to keep representing us? Keep that in mind too, because that's sitting on the back of all of our heads. Because now there's not much left. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to address the board? Any other citizen comments? Seeing no other citizen comments are closed. Announcements of the chairman. First of all, we met this afternoon, county contingent, inclusive of myself, county executive, Supervisor Clark, city contingent, as well as a group from the Menominee tribe to discuss the changes or new information that's come out of Washington with regard to the casino. Talked about issues that we would need to see here, at least at the county board level, as well as the common council, with regard to any future extension to address the new situation with the BIA. There will be additional information traded, additional meetings that will be held in an attempt to get a vote back on this county board the last meeting in September, which will be ahead of the September 30th date for this body to make a decision up or down as to whether you're inclined to make an extension on the casino IGA, I guess in hope of something coming out of Washington yet again. So that'll be forthcoming. Tomorrow afternoon there is a meeting with the Green Ribbon Planning Committee for the KD Park. We will see some preliminary concepts from the consultant that's been brought on board to master plan that park. And as soon as we have an opportunity to do so, we will get that information in front of this body and have a presentation here as well. So we'll meet on that tomorrow afternoon. September 8th at 6:30. September 8th, I believe, is a Thursday at 6:30 here in this building on the second floor conference room. We will have a legislative roundtable with our state legislators. My understanding is we will have most of them in attendance. Time will tell as to whether they respond or not to the letter that I sent out last week. The preliminary indication was they would have most of them here, so we'll see how that comes together. That is all I have. Supervisor reports. Supervisor Haas. Supervisor Gail Gens.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Kenosha County's Employees Weight Watchers Group will be hosting a food drive to benefit the Shalom Center. The food drive will be held on August 30th to September 30th. County employees and the public are invited to bring non-perishable food items for the Shalom Center pantry. A public collection receptacle will be placed on the first floor of the Kenosha County Administration Building. There will also be a collection receptacle in the first floor break room of Kenosha County Administration Building. The Weight Watchers group of 20 participants has lost more than 150 pounds in 6 weeks. Give them a little round of applause. which unfortunately I'm not a member, but maybe I'll join. County employees and county board supervisors are also invited to attend a free Weight Watchers meeting held every Tuesday, noon to 1 p.m. at the second floor conference room of KCAP in the month of September. For more information, you can contact Donna Esposito or Jenny Tunkowitz. Thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Michael.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On August 10th, the Judiciary and Law Committee met. On our agenda was there was 2 cabaret license and also the request for an activity control license for the Shadow Hill Ranch. That passed unanimously. The Hobnob Restaurant probationary cabaret license passed unanimously. Regarding the probationary cabaret license for the Climax Tavern, there was great debate, and it did pass by a 6-to-1 margin. But Mr. Chairman, I'm going to be requesting that that resolution be pulled from the agenda due to the fact that I just received earlier today from Captain Apker documentation and also additional information from the Department of Planning and Development regarding to some of the conditions, and there's some violations that need to be addressed that the committee was unaware of, and I'm going to be requesting that that be pulled from the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you. We will pull the committee under new business. Supervisor Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A report from the Finance and Administration Committee. At our last meeting, we had a report that the Human Services Committee, or the Human Services Department, is projecting a $1.2 million surplus for the year, primarily $287,000 from Aging and Disability Services, that's placements, Children and Family Services, $850,000 surplus, and then in the Health Department, due to a vacancy of $79,000. We did receive the second quarter Brookside report. Projected, or they're anticipating a $42,000 surplus as of June 30th. The Medicare positions, which are the positions that we have the greatest revenue potential, we're one position off of budgeted. That's the position that we hired a position for that a couple years ago. That seems to be working well. However, our private pay population is below budget, and therefore we have Medicaid positions which are really reimbursement at cost positions. From a revenue standpoint, we are at about 52% of our revenue still, and that's primarily because there was an unanticipated, the Medicare daily rate came in higher than what we budgeted. We're looking good through going into the third quarter. However, we have some concerning news for the fourth quarter. The federal government has informed us that the Medicare rates are going to be reduced in the fourth quarter by approximately 11%. Apparently they made a mistake in this fiscal year. So when we get the third quarter report, I've asked them to also project where we are in the fourth quarter, how we're going to finish up, so that information is available when we're looking at our 2012 budget. We had a presentation by Joint Services at our Finance and Administration Committee, more or less putting us on notice that their software or their programs need to be upgraded to come into compliance. They're anticipating a $4.5 million project that Kenosha County will have to pony up half for. Again, it's early. I've received different communications from the Sheriff Department questioning whether we needed to have that scope of project, and certainly that's going to be fleshed out with our IT department in trying to make an informed decision from the county board standpoint as to the scope of the project. We also received a report on our general fund, and we're probably going to be reporting on this monthly. We finished 2010 at almost $7.7 million. Currently this year, we are anticipating an overall surplus, and finishing up, we're projecting to finish up at about 8.4 million. We certainly have some areas that are causing us concern. The health insurance fund is tracking a $1.5 million deficit. Our tax delinquencies are anticipating an increase of about $550,000. On the positive side, we received, or we're going to receive, about $300,000 as a result of the Regional Transit Authority being dissolved, and that's the county's portion. Our inmate revenues are up by $588,000. We have some surplus as a result of the Wisconsin Retirement System budget repair bill. So that really hits it. I will continue to update you on this in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Jeff Gentz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Our Joint Services Board was unable to meet today due to a lack of a quorum, so we will be moving that to September 13th. Thank you.
You said September 13th? Thank you. Seeing no other lights, first order of business, Supervisor Michael. I'm going to ask you to poll your committee verbally to pull the item number 46 off of the agenda.
I'll start with Supervisor Haas. Supervisor Ronald Johnson. Supervisor David Singer. Supervisor Ronald Frederick.
There was a reason we're pulling it. Maybe we ought to hear what that reason is.
I believe I did state that there was some violations from the Department of Planning and Development. There's some violations.
Supervisor Michael, to be specific, the business owner is required to receive a certificate of compliance to Kenosha County zoning and floodplain ordinance. They have not made application, nor have they received such certificate of compliance. They have no compliance certificate to be in operation in Kenosha County under our current ordinance.
It's just a question is that when the chief deputy was there, he explained that everything conformed at the meeting that we had. That's all. I have no objection to pulling it. I just want to know specifically what the reason is, and I guess maybe we'll get the full details when we have our next meeting. Are you going to plan another meeting soon?
I would be putting it on our next agenda. I mean, we'll be meeting on.
You may do with it what you'd like.
And I would be requesting that a representative from the Department of Planning and Development be at our meeting.
It's your prerogative. Sure. Supervisor Frederick?
Supervisor Ron Grulich, Jr. Yes. Supervisor Robert Zerban? Aye. And I also vote aye.
Okay,
so
item 46 is pulled from the agenda. Clerk.
Chairman appointments, William P. Michael II to serve on the Joint Service Board. Jeffrey A. Gens to serve on the Joint Service Board. County Executive appointments, Patrice A. Hall to serve as the Kenosha County Medical Examiner.
Refer to the Human Services Committee.
Ordinance, first reading to required, 4 from the Executive Committee, an ordinance to repeal and recreate Section 2.0454 of the Municipal Code of Kenosha County Committee Operations. Molinaro, yes. Eckerness, yes. Clark, yes. Elverman, yes. Michael, yes. Noble, yes. Brunig, yes. Ordinance, 1 reading, 5 from Planning and Development and Extension Education Committee regarding comprehensive plan amendment. Planning, Development, and Extension Education Committee sponsor requests approval of draft annual report, a multi-jurisdictional comprehensive plan for Kenosha County 2035, 2010, 2011 annual report, and text amendment to Part 2 of Chapter 15, implementation element of the multi-jurisdictional comprehensive plan for Kenosha County 2035 to add exceptions for amendments to the plan for minor lot line adjustments, changes in wetlands, surface water, and environmental corridor boundaries, and the addition and/or subtraction of roads. Brunig, yes. Esposito, yes. Komeyer, yes. Underhill, yes. Decker, yes. Hallman, yes. Gable, yes.
Supervisor Brunig.
Move ordinance number 5.
Ordinance 5 moved by Supervisor Brunig, seconded by Supervisor Esposito. Supervisor Brunig.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. These documents would approve the 2010-2011 annual report and text amendments to Part 2 of Chapter 15 of the Multi-Jurisdictional Comprehensive Plan for Kenosha County 2035. The text amendments would add exceptions for amendments to the plan for minor lot line adjustments, changes in wetland, surface water, and environmental corridor boundaries, and the addition and/or subtraction of roads. The Planning, Development, Extension, Education Committee reviewed this information at their August 10th, 2011 meeting and recommended approval.
Thank you. Anyone on the issue? Seeing no lights, all those in favor of ordinance number 5 signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, motion carries.
Ordinance 6 from Planning, Development, and Extension Education Committee regarding proposed comprehensive plan amendment, Town of Paris, 16607 Burlington Road, Union Grove, Wisconsin. Request an amendment to the adopted land use plan map for Kenosha County 2035 in the Town of Paris from suburban density residential to business industrial park. From Brunig, yes. Esposito, yes. Komeyer, yes. Underhill, yes. Decker, yes. Hallman, yes. And Gable, yes.
Supervisor Brunig.
Move ordinance number 6.
Ordinance number 6 moved by Supervisor Brunig, seconded by Supervisor Kohlmeyer. Supervisor Brunig.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. These documents would approve amendments to map 65 of the Multi-Jurisdictional Comprehensive Plan for Kenosha County 2035 relative to parcels in the Town of Paris being changed from suburban density residential to business industrial park. The Town of Paris recommended approval of the request. The Planning, Development, Extension, Education Committee reviewed these map amendments at their August 10th, 2011 meeting and recommended approval.
Anyone on the issue? Ordinance number 6. Seeing no lights, all those in favor of ordinance 6 signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, ordinance 6 carries.
Ordinance 7 from Planning, Development, and Extension Education Committee regarding Full Gospel First Church owner requests a rezoning from I-1 Institutional District, A2 General Agricultural District, and C1 Lowland Resource Conservancy District to I-1 Institutional District, R3 Urban Single Family Residential District, A2 General Agricultural District, C1 Lowland Resource Conservancy District, and C2 Upland Resource Conservancy District in the Town of Salem. Brunig, yes. Esposito, yes. Komeyer, yes. Underhill, yes. Decker, yes. Hallman, yes. Gable, yes.
Supervisor Brunig.
Move ordinance number 7.
Ordinance 7 moved by Supervisor Brunig, seconded by Supervisor Underhill. Supervisor Brunig.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This property is located on the west side of 240th Avenue at the intersection of 125th Street. The rezoning would allow for the construction of a single-family residence. The Town of Salem recommended approval of the request.
Anyone on the issue? Ordinance number 7. Seeing no lights, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, ordinance 7 carries.
Ordinance 8 from Planning, Development, and Extension Education Committee regarding Wayne H. Cadditt's owner. Planning, Development, and Extension Education Committee sponsor request a rezoning from R3 Suburban Single Family Residential District to R7 Suburban 2-Family and 3-Family Residential District in the Town of Wheatland. Brunig, yes. Esposito, yes. Komeyer, yes. Underhill, yes. Decker, yes. Hallman, yes. Gable, yes.
Have you had this full an agenda at your committee in a while?
It hasn't been like this in a long time.
I don't think it has been. Supervisor Brunig.
Move ordinance number 8.
Ordinance number 8 moved by Supervisor Brunig, seconded by Supervisor Decker. Supervisor Brunig.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This property is located on the southeast corner of 398th Avenue and 60th Street. The rezoning would bring the existing use, which is a duplex, into compliance with the county's zoning ordinance, and the Town of Wheatland recommended approval of the request.
Anyone on the issue? Ordinance number 8. Seeing no lights, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries. Before you go on, Clerk, just to, before I forget, on your desk I placed this evening Kenosha County Board Committee meeting minutes, procedures, and considerations. That goes back to ordinance number, was it 2? 4. I will ask at the second reading, when we act on that ordinance, that this be added as an attachment, so you'll want to keep it, you'll want to read it, and make sure you bring it with you next week, or at the next meeting. Thank you.
Ordinance 9 from Planning, Development, and Extension Education Committee regarding Roger W. and Ethel Sino, owner, Planning, Development, and Extension Education Committee sponsor, requests a rezoning from R7 Suburban 2-family and 3-family residential district to R3 Suburban Single-Family Residential District in the town of Wheatland. Brunig, yes. Esposito, yes. Colmeyer, yes. Underhill, yes. Decker, yes. Hallman, yes. Gable, yes.
Supervisor Brunig.
Move ordinance number 9.
Ordinance 9 moved by Brunig, seconded by Hallman. Supervisor Brunig.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This property is located on the southeast corner of 398th Avenue and 60th Street. The rezoning would bring the existing use single-family residence into compliance with the county zoning ordinance. The town of Wheatland recommended approval of the request.
Anyone wishing to speak on ordinance number 9? Seeing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? Ordinance 9 carries.
Ordinance 10 from Planning, Development, and Extension Education Committee regarding Payne and Dolan Incorporated, owner, requests a rezoning from M2 Heavy Manufacturing District, B3 Highway Business District, R2 Suburban Single Family Residential District, and C1 Lowland Resource Conservancy District to M2 Heavy Manufacturing District, B3 Highway Business District, and C1 Lowland Resource Conservancy District in the town of Paris. Brunig, yes. Esposito, yes. Colmeyer, yes. Underhill, yes. Decker, yes. Hallman, yes. Gable, yes.
Supervisor Brunig.
Move ordinance number 10.
Ordinance number 10 moved by Supervisor Brunig, seconded by Supervisor Gable. Supervisor Brunig.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This property is located on the west side of 120th Avenue, approximately 0.7 miles north of State Highway 142. The rezoning would allow a new driveway for the new office building and protect existing wetlands. The town of Paris recommended approval of the request.
On the issue, Supervisor Noble.
A couple questions. First of all, it's fairly unusual to see a C1 going into another district, in this another classification. In this case, it's 3 acres going into B3. I consider that a pretty huge piece of conservancy property, and so I would like an explanation on that, for one.
Supervisor Brunig.
Could you clarify what you're looking at?
I'm looking at the map where it says right in the very center, C1. It says C1 to B3, 2.93 acres.
That's
correct.
correct.
Like I said, it's very unusual to take C1 property and make it B, basically make it anything but C1.
The DNR has stated that that was a man-made conservancy at one point, and they do not have to leave it as a C1.
So they staked it?
Yes.
And what? And is this the asphalt plant that's there? This existing property now?
Yes, it is.
You know, this I've brought this up many times, and now is a proper time, I guess, to the board. But my recollection was that asphalt plant had to have a 2-year or a 3-year renewable conditional use by the committee or in the county board, and I don't recall that's ever happening. And the reason why that would be important is because I consider that property, in my opinion, is probably not where I would want to put an asphalt plant, right on a highly traveled, valuable piece of property. So whatever happened, is it my memory is just not as good as it should be, or are we missing something here, not having that renewal process for the conditional use permit?
Supervisor Brunig, can you answer that?
Yes, I can. Payne and Dolan is not operating under a CUP. They are under a business that is licensed for that particular area and that particular zoning.
So I almost positive, though, when that came before this board and they initially got that particular piece of property to use for an asphalt plant, it was under the caveat that they had to come back every couple of years for a conditional use permit. And now it seems like somehow magically they're there for forever. And I'm going to vote against it tonight because I don't think my memory is that bad. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Noble. Any other questions? If not, I have a couple. Are you certain, Supervisor Brunig, that they are not operating under a conditional use permit?
That is correct. Supervisor Noble brought this to my attention a couple years ago, and we did check into it, and it is correct. They do not need, they are not operating under a CUP. They are operating the business according to...
I wasn't aware any business, whether it's in an approved zoning area or not, could operate without a conditional use permit. So I guess I've learned something today, and I'll ask that question to the county staff. Second question is, what is the proposed, why the change? What are they proposing to do out here?
They are putting in a new driveway. They put a new office building in the back, and now they are putting a driveway so that they don't have to go all the way through the entire site to get to the new building.
Okay. Any other discussion? Supervisor Clark.
Where is the office building depicted on this map? I see some buildings on this map. Where are they putting this driveway in? I mean, I see that they're going from a C1 to B3. Now, why are they taking an R2 to a C1? It just seems like, to me, that there's some sort of trade-off going on here, but...
Supervisor Brunig?
They are correcting the field conditions at the same time.
I'm sorry, they're correcting what?
Field conditions?
Field conditions?
Field conditions, yes.
So where's this new building going?
The building is already built. It's in the back.
So where is it on this map?
I don't think it shows on this map. There was another map that came through prior to this that we approved already through the county board that showed where the building was going to be going.
Thank you.
Any other discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries.
Ordinance 11 from Planning, Development, and Extension Education Committee regarding Northern Alpine Group LLC owner requests a rezoning from A2 General Agricultural District to R2 Suburban Single Family Residential District, A2 General Agricultural District, C1 Lowland Resource Conservancy District, and C2 Upland Resource Conservancy District in the town of Wheatland. Brunig, yes. Esposito, yes. Kohlmeyer, yes. Underhill, yes. Decker, yes. Hallman, yes. Gable, yes.
Supervisor Brunig.
Move ordinance number 11.
Ordinance number 11 moved by Brunig, seconded by Esposito. Supervisor Brunig.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This property is located on the south side of 60th Street at the intersection of County Trunk Highway NN. The rezoning would allow the development of 3 single-family residential lots. The town of Wheatland recommended approval of the request.
Thank you. Anyone on the issue? Ordinance number 11. Seeing none. All those in favor of ordinance 11 signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, motion carries.
Resolution 45 from Administration Finance, a resolution authorizing a notice to be given of the desire of Kenosha County to terminate the collective bargaining agreement between Kenosha County and Local 990 jail staff. Clark, yes. O'Day, yes. Eckerness, yes. Gens, yes. Rose, yes. Singer, yes. Greedy, excused.
I don't know. Supervisor Clark.
I move resolution 45.
Resolution 45 moved by Clark, seconded by O'Day. Supervisor Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Resolution 45 is required, or at the opinion of the Corporation Council, is a step that we should take to affirmatively cancel the collective bargaining contract. The deadline to do this is on by September 1st. You'll recall that we previously did this with the Local 70 contract. This is language. There's language in these contracts that hold out the possibility that if we don't terminate it, that the contract would be in effect until the end of the year. This is similar to what we did again on Highway 70 contract.
And we have, I see we've adjusted the language in here to match the amendment on the Local 70 contract, is that correct? Or termination resolution, is that correct?
I don't know exactly what you're talking about.
Well, it'd be the last sentence relative to the August 31st date, I believe.
Yes.
Thank you. Anyone on the issue? Seeing no lights, all those in favor of Resolution 45 signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? No. Motion carries.
Resolution 47 from Judiciary and Law Committee regarding probationary cabaret license for Hobnob Restaurant. Michael, yes. Haas, yes. Ron Johnson, yes. Singer, yes. Ron Frederick, yes. John Grulich, yes. Zerban, yes.
Supervisor Michael.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move resolution number 47.
Resolution 47, moved by Michael, seconded by Haas. Supervisor Michael.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is for a probationary cabaret license for the Hobnob Restaurant located at 227 South Sheridan Road in the town of Summers. And it was inspected by the Kenosha County Sheriff's Department. It was found to be in conformity with the cabaret ordinance number 802. I urge your support on this. Thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Clark.
I just have one question. After watching the city, there's being unconstitutional. Why is it that Kenosha County is getting involved with whether a cabaret license issued when the town can issue a liquor license on their own? It just seems like we're putting our nose in an area that we don't need to be. The local folks know what they want to do. Is there an explanation, Corporation Counsel?
Corporation Counsel.
Cabaret license ordinance is intended to regulate facilities where entertainment is offered. Some of it probably has its roots in adult entertainment, so that patrons are farther away from the stage and things of that sort. That's from what I recall when it was first introduced into the municipal code quite some years ago.
So
also had to do with music and decibels, the loudness of the music and things of that sort.
So there's not a state law, in your opinion or your knowledge, that require us to act on these in the future if we decide to change the municipal code?
I think that's a local prerogative.
Okay. Again, I think we should at least take a look at that. I think the local people, I think they know best what they want in their backyard. Thank you.
Anyone on the issue? Anyone else? I'm going to take an opportunity here just for a moment to elaborate a little bit on Supervisor Ron Frederick's question, because I think it goes to the point, somewhat to the point that Supervisor Clark brought up. There appears to be a disconnect between, in this case, or the previous agenda item, the town of Summers and Kenosha County, in that the request for the certificate of compliance with the county zoning ordinance was never made, and the town did not notify the county that a liquor license, or for that matter a cabaret license, was going to be requested. So I'm going to work between the two bodies to make sure that we somehow button that up, so that if a request is made of the county, the town is notified, a request made of the town, the county is notified, so that hopefully we don't have what we had happen here tonight. And I'll also ask them to talk a little bit amongst themselves about this issue that Supervisor Clark brings up relative to the ability to grant a liquor license, and the county still has to hold jurisdiction over the cabaret license. So I think it's a good point, and certainly I'll see if I can't have them engage that in the conversation as well. Any other discussion on the issue? Seeing no lights, all those in favor of Resolution 47 signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, motion carries.
Resolution 48 from Judiciary and Law Committee regarding activity control license for Shadow Hill Ranch. Michael, yes. Haas, yes. Johnson, yes. Singer, yes. Ron Frederick, yes. Grulich, yes. Zerban, yes.
Supervisor Michael.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move resolution number 48.
Resolution 48 moved by Supervisor Michael, seconded by Johnson. Supervisor Michael.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Resolution 48 basically deals with the fact that our friends out at the Shadow Hill Ranch have done such a great job with Country Thunder. Now they're getting into the business of marathons or 5K races. They are putting on what's called the Warrior Dash, which is the ultimate 5K race. It's one of the most demanding and unique terrains, and that will be coming up in May. Or excuse me, that will be coming up, I apologize, September 17th and 18th. They have, inspection has been done on the premises. Everything is in compliance. I urge your support on this resolution. Thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Brunig.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Other than promoting this way before it has come before the board again, I actually am in favor of this. The Warrior Dash was held out in Arizona earlier this year. There were about 10,000 people that attended this event, and they only had one minor injury. It was someone who twisted their ankle at the end of the event, running to get hosed off after they ran through the mud pile. So I actually am in favor of this. Thank you.
Anyone else wishing to speak on Resolution 48? Seeing no lights, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Those opposed, motion carries.
Resolution 49 from Planning, Development, and Extension Education Committee regarding proposed comprehensive plan amendment. Town of Paris sponsor requests an amendment to the adopted land use plan map for Kenosha County 2030 in the Town of Paris from suburban density residential to business industrial. Brunig, yes. Esposito, yes. Colmeyer, yes. Underhill, yes. Decker, yes. Hallman, yes. Gable, yes.
Supervisor Brunig.
Move Resolution 49.
Resolution 49 moved by Brunig, seconded by Colmeyer. Supervisor Brunig.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is basically the same as ordinance number 6. These documents would approve amendments to map 65 of the multi-jurisdictional comprehensive plan for Kenosha County 2035 relative to parcels in the town of Paris being changed from suburban density residential to business industrial park. The town of Paris recommended approval of the request.
Anyone on the issue? This is Resolution 49. Seeing no lights, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Those opposed, 49 carries.
Resolution 50 from Planning, Development, and Extension Education Committee regarding comprehensive plan amendment. Planning, Development, and Extension Education Committee sponsor requests approval of draft annual report, a multi-jurisdictional comprehensive plan for Kenosha County 2035, 2010, 2011, annual report, and text amendment to Part 2 of Chapter 15, implementation element of the multi-jurisdictional comprehensive plan for Kenosha County 2035 to add exceptions for amendments to the plan for minor lot line adjustments, changes in wetlands, surface water, and environmental corridor boundaries, and the additional and/or subtraction of roads. Brunig, yes. Esposito, yes. Colmeyer, yes. Underhill, yes. Decker, yes. Hallman, yes. Gable, yes.
Supervisor Brunig.
Move resolution number 50.
Resolution number 50 moved by Brunig, seconded by Underhill. Supervisor Brunig.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is the same as ordinance number 5. These documents would approve the 2010-2011 annual report and text amendments to Part 2 of Chapter 15 of the multi-jurisdictional comprehensive plan for Kenosha County 2035. The text amendments would add exceptions for amendments to the plan for minor lot line adjustments, changes in wetlands, surface water and environmental corridor boundaries, and the addition and/or subtraction of roads. The Planning, Development, and Extension Education Committee reviewed this information at their August 10th, 2011 meeting and recommended approval.
Thank you. Anyone on the issue? This is resolution number 50. Seeing no lights, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Those opposed, resolution 50 carries.
Resolution 51, Planning, Development, and Extension Education Committee, a resolution to approve appointments to the Kenosha County Land Information Council. Brunig, yes. Esposito, yes. Colmeyer, yes. Underhill, yes. Decker, yes. Hallman, yes. Gable, yes.
Supervisor Brunig.
Move resolution number 51.
Resolution number 51 moved by Supervisor Brunig, seconded by Supervisor Decker. Supervisor Brunig.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This resolution would approve the appointment of Martin Laycock, other public designate Information Technologies Rep, and George E. Melcher, Land Information Officer, to the Land Information Council for a one-year term until July 1st, 2012. The Planning, Development, and Extension Education Committee reviewed this information at their meeting August 10th, 2011, and recommended approval of the appointments.
Anyone on the issue? Resolution 51. Seeing no lights, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Those opposed, resolution 51 carries.
Old business, policy resolution. 1, from Finance Administration Committee, a resolution to establish interim employment policies for employees employed by the Kenosha County Division of Highways, Local 70. Clark, yes. O'Day, yes. Gens, yes. Eckerness, yes. Rose, no. Singer excused. Grady excused.
Okay, before we get started, a couple of comments I'm going to make. First of all, I want to recognize Supervisor Clark, certainly the entire Finance and Administration Committee, but in particular Supervisor Clark, for taking the leadership role in bringing this issue to, I guess, what is going to be a conclusion this evening. Certainly, we recognize that there's going to be disagreement on the issue. There's going to be two sides that aren't going to be in total agreement. One thing I can say about Supervisor Clark, which I repeatedly say, and I think we've heard on this board floor before, he generally approaches the issues fairly, and certainly having done his homework. I can't say enough about the opportunity he provided for both sides to sit at the table and air their concerns, be heard, and allow the committee to make an informed decision. I want to point out that, you know, I sat in a number of meetings, Clark and myself, with Mr. Riedel and the county executive from time to time and other staff working through this issue. In fact, Supervisor Clark, I believe, had a meeting ahead of our 2 o'clock casino discussion today on this very issue. So, you know, once again, this is the criticism that we either don't do our homework or don't put the effort in, when in fact neither one of us got much done in our day job today in an effort to continue to push forward on county business. But I want to make it very clear that at no time ever, and we were in situations clearly where statements could have been made just between us in the room, at no time has there ever been a derogatory comment made about our county staff. Conversely, I want to recognize our county employees who have come before, whether it be the committee or the county board as a whole, or contacted us or called me individually, that I found it problematic in terms of what your position was or what your delivery was or how it was delivered. Again, I recognize there's going to be a difference of opinion. For the most part, I haven't heard comments directed at staff, meaning administration, that are negative or derogatory. Of course, things get heated from time to time. I believe there is a great deal of respect and a great deal of understanding between the two, as well as this body and all that we have to do. I expect this evening, going through the debate, that we're not going to get into or lose sight of all the effort that's gone into getting us to this point. I will allow discussion all night long if it needs to be. I've said that time and time again in this county board floor. I am in no hurry. I have nowhere to go. We'll debate it as long as you'd like. I will give everyone an equal opportunity. But I don't want to deteriorate, and I will do all I can to control it into what we did last time. Fortunately, we're all here. We can stand up this evening and be counted. We can be heard. You want to bring up procedural issues, bring them up. When the decision is made, if you don't like it, we're going to move forward. At the end of the day, I have a great deal of respect, as does everyone in this room, not only for our employees, but for our administration, our staff, regardless of the rank, regardless of who you are assigned or who you pledge your allegiance to with regard to representation or non-representation. And I've never taken that away from anybody. So I trust as we move forward today, we'll do it in as professional a manner as we can. We'll respect each other's position. We'll understand the shoes that each of us walk in from day to day. And when it's all said and done, we'll continue to move Kenosha County forward. Supervisor Clark.
I move Policy Resolution 1.
Policy Resolution 1 moved by Supervisor Clark, seconded by Supervisor O'Day. Supervisor Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just briefly, I want to thank the supervisors, the employees, Mr. Casimir, for all their input in this process. The Finance and Administration Committee on this issue alone has probably spent over 6 hours of time deliberating this. We had our public hearing last Tuesday, and we were there for 4 hours and 15 minutes. So I know everybody has feelings on this. I hope that the employees feel that we've given them an opportunity. I believe we do understand their concerns. And tonight, I'm going to try to be as efficient as I can. We certainly could have a long night, So my first approach is just to kind of talk about some of the amendments that came up, and then I'm going to talk about the two different ways I think we can handle this on the county board floor to get it done efficiently, so we're at a point that we can act on whatever amendments that supervisors may wish to make. We, at our last Tuesday meeting, I believe everybody received a copy of the minutes. I want to thank Donna Esposito for the format. I think it was very detailed, and if you took the time to prepare for this meeting, you understand the issues and what we discussed. As far as seniority, the amendments on the committee were, number one, to use seniority for vacation request. For 2011, all vacation requests are in. For 2012, we understand that this somewhat sets the table for the future policy coming. It sends a statement also to the administration that this is what we want to see in the final policy. As far as holiday time, that is not really applicable to the Highway 70, but it is applicable to the 990 jail, and that is also done based on a seniority. We also used seniority as a method of assigning overtime, and when we talk about overtime, there's a policy or a rule in place where they're going to try to equalize the overtime amongst the employees, and they came in and they talked about it doing alphabetically. The committee said, okay, we want to start as seniority, but at the end of the day, the goal is with overtime, and part of this goes back to a arbitration decision that they're going to allocate overtime, attempt to make it even. We talked about seniority as it relates to layoffs, promotions. Management in the minutes has made it clear that seniority will be considered, also qualifications, work effort, the various different things. I'm not going to read totally through the minutes. The Finance Administration Committee felt that to leave that in the hands of the administration to determine how promotions, layoffs were going to be handled. So as far as wages, there was at the last county board meeting, and this relates to 990 jail, the sheriff made reference to changing the policy to allow step increases, and this really affects the jail. There are employees that were hired that have anniversary dates between August 31st, 2011 and December 31st, 2011, and it would be inequitable, in our opinion, to not grant them their step increases. Employees earlier in the year that prior to that point in time did receive their step increases. The committee went along with that recommendation. That is one of the amendments that we have there. We've, as far as overtime goes, there are two issues. Number one, the policy adopts FLSA, and I'm going to talk about Highway 70 right now. Currently, I believe there are multiple gyrations here, but currently the employees have a standard work day. Under the contract, they have a standard work day. They work 8 hours. Once they work their 8 hours, they're paid overtime. If they are called in early, they get a 2-hour overtime, and if it continues their day, they get to work their scheduled hours. And then there are times currently where they work on holidays or Sundays that it's double time. FLSA, the straight FLSA says you get paid overtime after 40 hours worked. The committee, well, straight after 40 hours work, so if you had a holiday, day on Monday, and you worked 4 days, and you were working 2 hours of overtime, you worked, or 2 hour, you working 10-hour days, you ended up working 4 times 10, that would be 40 hours. You didn't work over 40 hours, so you wouldn't get any overtime. You'd have 8 hours of holiday, 40 hours of straight time. That is what FLSA would say on highway, on the 70. What the committee did is the committee said, we will count paid time off, vacation, holiday, casual, as hours worked for determining overtime. So if you had a holiday and then you worked 40 hours, the way it is now going to work is that's 48 hours work, you're going to be paid 8 hours of overtime. That's what we adopted there. FLSA for the jail, and this is, again, the Federal Protective Service rules, 24/7 rules. It says in a 28-day period, if you work more than 171 hours, you are going to be paid overtime. At 28-day periods, 4 weeks, there was some question as to whether they were scheduled 40 or 32. It's very clear that the employees of the jail are scheduled for 40-hour weeks. At this point, we had questioned 160 hours. We questioned the equity of 160 hours. Why are we having them, as was said earlier, working 171 hours and working an extra 11 hours to get overtime? I did receive some numbers there. That savings, if you will, that 11 hours is a $165,000 number. There was the overtime based on 2010, and I asked why would FLSA have 171 instead of 160? And I don't know that I got a really good, clear answer. When we get into the debate, and that amendment is sure to come up, I'm sure Bob Riedel will speak to it. But it really came down to that it's a 24/7 operation, and there are more overtime hour opportunities in a 24/7 than any other area or a straight 8-hour, 40-hour week. And the numbers from 2010, the jailer overtime on average, just total overtime paid in the jail by the number of employees, was $8,026. That could be because we have understaffing. There's a lot of reasons, but that's a number that's been calculated. For the highway department, the overtime was $4,262. In looking at the changes, of, the 171 hours, and some of the per savings per employee for the jail is $1,857. The per savings per employee with the change in the double overtime, rather than paying overtime on an 8-hour day, worked its way out to $1,667. Those are numbers that were provided, were asked for at the committee. That was something that was reviewed earlier today. I think we talked about vacations, grievance procedures. We had lengthy discussion on grievance procedure. We even had an amendment to try to define who was a impartial hearing officer. The committee decided not to go there because they felt that that was defined in statute, what constituted an impartial hearing officer. And the question is, why are we trying to rewrite state statute? we essentially, the current, or the Act 10, the requirements are that we have a grievance procedure in place for severe items, and I think that would be the way that the policy is presented to us was suspensions over 2 days. I can't remember the other items off the top of my head. The committee took the measure, number one, say that employees have a right to the appeal process to go through the impartial hearing officer for any suspensions of 1 day or more. Something that came out of our first committee meeting, we were trying to recognize or had a discussion about, well, what about issues that come up that are outside of this severe category, and how do we act with it, or how do we give the employees that opportunity? It started out kind of being wide open. It turned into a disciplinary items only. And if you read the as you read the policy or the attachments, and it talks about levels of discipline and the progressive discipline that we have, it starts with a verbal reprimand. It goes to a written reprimand, and it escalates to a suspension under the normal course of action. The verbal reprimand is temporary to the file in terms of the ability to use it against an employee for 6 months. The written reprimand is a year. The committee, trying to address those lesser items, allowed the employees who received those and made an amendment to make an appeal within 30 days to the Finance and Administration Committee. And the committee really had the option to dismiss the conduct, or to dismiss the verbal or written warning, or if they wanted to send it to an impartial hearing officer. I believe, I'm not sure if you guys received a letter from Michael Best in Friedrich. There was an attorney that took a look at this. Certainly it is within our right to do that. It was questioned whether that was good public policy in terms of efficiency of government. And I look at what this morphed from, to leave the door open for all minor things, and it turned into the less significant things where the 1 day was included, and now that 1 day got pushed up into a higher category where they can take that to the impartial hearing officer. I think that certainly there's going to be discussion on this tonight, but I'm not quite sure that we made the right decision as I stand back and look at it. Because verbal hearings, verbal warnings, written warnings escalate to a suspension if it continues. And those suspensions are going to work their way through the process, and the impartial hearing officer is going to take a look at that and consider it or not consider it based on the time that's there. So it's just something to think about. When we were in the committee hearing, I sometimes worried about making sausage. We were getting so intertwined with the issues. So I'm not sure where we are in this, but it's something that needs to come up. We have in here, we talked about the criteria for an impartial hearing officer. We decided not to go that way. There was a house cleaning amendment for the, now we're talking Highway 70. There was a house cleaning amendment that changed the hours from where it started at 12 a.m., I believe, on Sunday, and then it ended at 11:59 on Saturday. minor change. Equipment, we had discussions about the equipment, and certainly it was clear the hour was getting late. Some people wanted to get out of there. And some of the Highway 70 issues probably got ran through. Mr. Montague was right on that. But as we took up each one of those issues and we discussed it and had the presentation, the committee asked for any amendments by the supervisors there. There were no amendments to change the equipment policy. The belief there was that I don't believe administration is going to be bouncing equipment around just for the heck of it. I think they're going to have a business reason to do it. I can't imagine they're going to be making changes daily. I would hope that wouldn't be the case. And it really came down to management has cited some financial savings, some efficiencies, and for some, you say trust management. For others, there's a lack of trust. As this supervisor wants to give them the opportunity and the tools to manage their operation. I think we addressed overtime. The overtime for Highway 70, as the policy was presented to us, was mandatory overtime. In the discussion, it came down to mandatory overtime for snow removal purposes only. Certainly the question will need to be answered tonight when we get to that point is why is mandatory overtime necessary? Certainly some compelling arguments. I heard that 80% number. I'm sure we'll get there. Jail issues. There was a lot of discussion about swaps. And really what swapping is, it allows an employee who's scheduled to swap their work time with another employee. And if I swapped with Bill and Bill got off, he's still going to get paid for that time. I'm going to work his time and he's going to swap back with me. There was discussion about does it cause overtime? Is it costly to the county? And here's at least what I understand. And the policy here is not so much that they can't do swaps. The policy, or I think the rub with the employees is we have to use our casual days. If you're going to swap, you first have to use your benefit timers at casual days, Mr. Riedel. Casual days. Casual days allow employees to call in a half an hour before their shift and say, I'm going to take a casual day, and then someone's got to either volunteer for overtime or be ordered for overtime. So the administration maintains that there's a cost of doing that. The using of the casual days, or requiring them to use the casual days, I am told that the employees want to save those so when they get to the peak time and holiday season, Christmas from Thanksgiving to January 1st, that they want to be able to pull a casual day out, which could cause overtime. The sheriff in years past has issued emergency orders where casual days couldn't be used, and then those casual days had to be paid out. Not a significant number, but the number was about $10,000. I asked for that number, and it was presented. So I think hopefully everybody read the minutes. We provided the minutes with red lines so they could see the motions. They were in detail so you could understand the discussion. We provided both resolutions or policy resolutions with red lines of the changes. I will tell you, and I'm trying to handle both of these, then we'll take them up one by one. that the Kenosha County Sheriff's Department, there was another one put on your desk today, and on the bottom it's dated August 23rd. When we were reviewing stuff today, we discovered that the disciplinary policy that is subject to a review was not changed down to 1 day. So I asked Lorette to review the policies that were in our packet with this, and she assures me that there are no other changes other than that, and I just wanted to put the full, I told them I wanted the full policy on the desk in case there are other changes. That was the only change.
Supervisor Clark, did that in fact happen, that we have this? All right. I didn't get one. The Vice Chairman doesn't have one either. I can work off of the, Mr. Gertzen, don't go make a copy.
I can point out what the change is when we get there.
I can live with it. Although the clerk will need a copy, yes. I'm sorry, go
Okay.
ahead.
So there are two ways to handle this on the county board tonight. Number one, on behalf of the Finance and Administration Committee, I can make a motion to substitute the ordinance that had the first and second reading, and that's in order. It's essentially, substitute is an amendment. I can do that, or I will go down that road if there's no objection from the county board to do it that way. And the reason that I want to at least do it that way is it puts it out there with all the changes of the Finance and Administration Committee. You can see what they are, and that can be the starting point for any supervisor that decides that they want to go through and make amendments as to what's here. If it is not going to be accepted by the board to handle it that way and there are opposition, the policy of trying to substitute means we're really trying to act on the original one and the substituted one at the same time. It's confusing, probably going to take longer, and if we don't go that way, then I'm going to go page by page, amendment by amendment, and make a motion to amend each one. I just think we're a lot more efficient to make a motion to substitute without objection from the board. We get that before us. We have the red line document, and then we get to work on whatever amendments or whatever issues are out there. So, Mr. Chairman, I would make a motion. I would ask, before I make the motion, if there are any objections from the board to have a motion to substitute policy resolution for Highway 70.
All right, I will ask the board for any objection to substitute, to introducing a substitute resolution. Any objection from the floor?
Okay.
Seeing none, Supervisor Clark.
With that, Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to substitute the 2011 policies for the Department of Public Works.
And that is Policy Resolution 1.
Policy Resolution 1, yes.
Motion made by Clark, seconded by Hallman, to introduce substitute resolution for Policy Resolution Number 1. Supervisor Clark, anything further?
Just point of clarification from Corporation Counsel. It is at this point now that we have to vote on the substitution and then we can start amending? Okay. So
on the floor before you is the, we have to vote on the issue of substitution right now.
Yes.
I trust that is debatable.
I hope we don't need to debate it so we can get on with the issues.
I certainly don't believe we do, but you know, if it's debatable, I need to allow it. Is there any issue, any question on the issue of the substitution?
Parks, correct?
You are correct.
Okay.
Seeing no lights, all those in favor of the motion to substitute signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, motion carries. Anything further, Supervisor Clark?
At this time, I will yield the floor.
On the issue of the substituted policy resolution number 1 with the amendments that are not only in red line in front of you, but in deference to the issues brought forward by Supervisor Clark. Any supervisors wishing to address the issue? Seeing no lights. Supervisor Clark.
Are we ready to vote on this without any amendments?
The statement I just made was seeing no lights, and then you pushed yours.
Okay, well, there is an amendment. I didn't want to take the floor. There is an amendment, a housekeeping amendment, that needs to be made. On page 2, overtime, in red, it says Kenosha County will continue its practice of equalizing overtime based on years of service in descending order from most years of service to the least. The amendment that I'm proposing, and I'll explain why, is Kenosha County will continue its practice of, and here's where I'm inserting, attempting to equalize overtime annually, inserting the word annually. So we're inserting the words attempting to, between of and equalizing, and between overtime and based annually based on years of service in descending order from the most years of service to the least. The administration has told us that's what they're going to attempt to do, but they're not going to get it exact. It's impossible that they're going to get it exact, and they just wanted it clear that they're going to equalize overtime, attempt to equalize it based on an annual basis. Do we know where we are?
There's a motion by Supervisor Clark to amend the overtime language, seconded by Supervisor Decker. On the issue of the amendment, Supervisor Noble? Supervisor Clark, are you done?
Yes.
Supervisor Noble?
No, not on this amendment.
Push your light again, please. Anyone on the amendment offered by Supervisor Clark, which reads, Kenosha County will continue its practice of attempting to equalize overtime annually based on years of service, in descending order from the most years of service to the least. I can read her writing. Anyone on the issue of the amendment? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? The amendment carries. That's all we have. So we are now back on the substituted policy resolution number 1 as amended. We're going to start printing programs for these meetings, I think. Supervisor Noble?
Yes, Supervisor Clark mentioned that upon reflection he wasn't so sure the committee went the right way, and I think he was talking about this as changing it from 2 days to 1 day. I'm not positive, but could he explain that to me? I think I want to make an amendment on that.
Supervisor Clark, can you clarify the grievance policy?
Was that what you were
Sure.
talking about when you said upon reflecting you don't know for sure we went the right direction?
Going back to, if you go beyond the employee health benefits section there, they've got a section employee health benefit. You flip back 3 pages, and then we should be to Kenosha County Discipline Policy and Grievance Procedure. If you go first of all, that the committee, and I'm not at the right spot, but the committee changed or gave the employees the right to go to an independent hearing officer for any 1-day suspension. It used to be 2 days, so they could get a 1 day, and there really was no avenue for them to go through to due process or bring it for somebody else to look at. The committee said anything 1 day now they can go to an independent hearing officer. The point that I was making, if we're now on to the second page of the Kenosha County Discipline Policy and Grievance Procedure, the area in red It says appeal procedure for verbal and written reprimands. The letter from Michael Best certainly raises issues as to the efficiency and the utilization of county resources to hear appeals for verbal and written reprimands. Because verbal and written reprimands come out of your file automatically. I think they said that it was a non-property offense. It didn't take money out of the employee's pocket. That those things were going to go away in time if their behavior was correct. Now, they would be in their file, not for progressive discipline, but if there was something that came up down the road and they wanted to make a case as to an employee's work history, it would be there. You understand that. But the progressive discipline is verbal, written, suspension. And suspension is going to go to an independent hearing officer, and they're going to consider these things. So the point is, are we in good public policy and the best use of our legislative time, administrative time? Is this a good policy when this is going to be looked at anyways if they progress? The consensus of the administration, their feeling is this is not needed. The opinion of the outside attorney, or their thought process is, while we have the right to do this, is this the right thing to do? And when I look at it and understand that progressive discipline, that they're going to have an opportunity to look at this, I question it as well.
Yeah, I read the Michael Best opinion, and I concur, but I don't exactly know how I would amend this to
You would strike
be in
it.
conformance. To strike this
You
whole
would make a
section?
motion to strike.
All right.
Am I clear, just so everyone understands, a motion to strike would be to essentially leave it the way it was presented prior to Finance and Administration, correct, or amending it?
The motion to strike it would get rid of the red that's on the page, which really allows for a appeal procedure for verbal and written reprimands.
What about that one
Employees
day?
have the ability for anything that they're losing wages under, when we change it from 2 days to 1 day, to take it to an independent hearing officer. An independent hearing officer is going to see all this progressive discipline in the file and come to their own conclusion.
All right, I believe we said the same thing. You were striking the amendment that came out of the committee.
Yes.
But you're going to leave the 1 day.
The 1 day was a separate amendment. We're going to leave that.
Okay. So I would then make a motion to strike that appeal procedure for verbal and written reprimand on page 2 of the Kenosha County Discipline Policy and Grievance Procedure. And that would be in support of the legal opinion that we got from Michael Best.
I want to check with the clerk, make sure that we, what's that?
This right here.
That's fine.
And Michael Best.
So you have the proposal by Supervisor Noble, correct? I just want to make sure that you're following. Motion made by Supervisor Noble to strike the language, and seconded by Supervisor Gail Gentz. Supervisor Noble, anything further?
No, just that somebody asked me, what am I looking at? Just so everybody knows, it's on page 2 of the Kenosha County Discipline Policy and Grievance Procedure. It's the red part. It says appeal procedure for verbal and written reprimands. And basically, Supervisor Clark did a very good job of bringing it to my attention. But if you've read this Michael Best opinion, he pretty much, Supervisor Clark summarized what Michael Best was saying. We're going to get into a lot of cost for, if we have an appeal procedure for every verbal and written reprimand. So we'll just reserve it for somebody losing a day's pay. Then there's a procedure, which is we're going to leave that suspension of 1 day as it is. All right, that's all I had to say.
For clarification, the motion was made by Supervisor Noble and seconded by Supervisor Decker. Supervisor Zerban.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My concern with removing this, and I have not had the opportunity to read the opinion from the attorney's office, but my concern with this is with management being given the latitude to make determinations of layoff and promotions without a basis of seniority, and determining factors being work performance, possibly violations. I don't think that this gives us a lot of protection for our employees should an employee feel they're being treated unfairly by their supervisor and kind of being railroaded out of the department. So I'm in favor of keeping this in, because I think with us kind of going into a gray area here with these interim policies, I'd hate to see something like this be more permanent. And with this being written now and accepted now, that it might actually become a continuation into our permanent policies and procedures. So I'm not in support of removing this. Thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Singer on the amendment.
Thank you, Chairman. This was the exact discussion that we had in committee is over this point that Supervisor Zurbon indicated, because it is, although it may be expunged out of the record after a certain amount of time, it's still there. And they use it for promotion. They use it for all sorts of reasons. I've heard it used as excuses and arguments in past grievances, even though it wasn't there. It was still used as an argument. So if it's going to be used for an argument, it's going to be used for promotions. And it will affect the livelihood of our employees somewhere down the line. And if this was a legal opinion, I could, at least take some, but it was really just it was an opinion on policy. That's really what it was, what we got from Michael Best Friedman. And I'm not in support of this amendment at all. And so I'll be voting against it.
All right, so just for clarification, the language in the policy, whether amended or left alone, doesn't change whether the written reprimand stays in someone's file. Is that correct? Well, I don't think we have the ability to make that change.
The appeal procedure for written or verbal reprimand, because it's all documented in a file,
correct,
can be removed by the committee. I mean, if this stays with the committee, it was said in committee that we have any and all options. If we find that it's not warranted, the committee could say no, that we want to discharge that. That's in Lorette or Mr. Riedel can speak to that, but that was my understanding of what our committee discussed. Otherwise, if we don't have this, it falls off in six months or a year, but it's in the file for future reference on other issues, and maybe Lorette or Mr. Riedel can speak to that.
Well, I'm glad I asked the question, because that discussion did not come up at any committee meeting I attended.
I believe it did, and I mentioned when I was making my presentation here tonight that it was, while it after 6 months or a year that it couldn't be considered for progressive, it remained in the file. I did state that.
That was correct. My question, and I'll ask this to Mr. Riedel, because I want this board to be clear on what we're debating. Will a change to this section of the policy affect whether or not a letter, expunged or not, remains in an employee's file?
It will not change. The policy reads under verbal reprimands will remain active for 6 months. Under written reprimands will remain active for 1 year. And the part you are striking is merely the appeal process for those two notices that we give as a precursor to a suspension.
So regardless of what we do, the committee will not have the ability to remove a letter from a file by any committee action?
Correct. Well, yes. Essentially, yes.
You mean correct?
Correct.
Okay. Just for clarification.
Yeah,
All right. So that's, I think that's a very specific distinction and clarity that needs to be made as you debate this issue. Supervisor Decker on the policy as amended. State your point.
In the red paragraph, it says, if the committee will dismiss or conduct. I mean, what's the effect of dismiss? I think the intention was that as if it never happened and it wouldn't be in the file. That's the intent of the word dismiss in the amendment. So I just want to be clear on that, and I think the committee will support that.
When I was at the meeting, the discussion was send it to an independent hearing officer or not. Those were the options.
No, it went further than that. If you read the minutes, I mean, it went further than that, and that's what's in here.
All right, then the administration is aware of what the committee's intent is. Supervisor Decker on the substitute as amended. Actually, it's on this current amendment. I'm sorry. Yes or no?
Supervisor Clark was very clear in explaining what the letter from Michael Best and Friedrich stated, but he, at least my understanding was also that the letter stated that an employee, if they did get a verbal or written warning, they can write something to attach to that warning in their file, stating that they do disagree with it and their reasoning behind it. So that stays with that warning. So if somebody were to look through their file, they can see the disagreement based by the employee, and also, and that is in state statutes, I believe, is what Michael Best and Friedrich said in their letter, if I remember correctly, that that's under state statutes that they're allowed to do that. And so once those warnings fall off at the same time, so do these letters that the employees write. So that in itself is an appeal written and attached to those warnings, an appeal by the employee. So I feel that that is enough for these verbal and written warnings that will fall off in 6 months or a year. They fall off, according to Michael Best and Friedrich.
Supervisor Gable, we're not going to debate amongst ourselves.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to ask, someone needs to answer the question here, whether it be administration or Lorette, our corporation counsel who's been involved in these policies, whether or not a county board, committee, or whole has the ability to remove a letter from an employee's file. Or corporation counsel will contest any file.
I'm going to defer to Lorette and ask her to comment on this, but one thing that has not been talked about, and that's the fact that this may be a public record. That disciplinary action, that written reprimand may be pertinent at somewhere down the line, and I would caution against the total destruction. And I think either Bob or somebody from personnel perhaps could, I believe the practice in the past has been to take something, written reprimand or an oral reprimand that had been reduced to writing out of the file for purposes of discipline. I don't know about promotion, but taken out of the file physically and placed in another file. Am I wrong on that?
And that is exactly the question I'm asking. It is a public record document at that point in time.
It may be subject to, I don't want to say that it's a public record because it may at some point be subject to a public record. For example, somebody could have been reprimanded for an accident, a car accident that they were involved in with a highway truck or some other vehicle. That might be pertinent somewhere down the road in litigation or things of that sort. So that's why I'm asking.
That's exactly the question I'm asking. Mr. Riedel.
It's a file we call the dead discipline file.
Say that again?
It's the file we call the dead discipline file. So the discipline, the action is recorded. It remains as a record. It does not affect, for the purposes of progressive discipline, the employee. So the verbal warning stays in for 6 months. It is placed in the dead discipline file after that is expired, so long as there isn't a repeat of a specific problem, that specific problem. Supervisor Decker is accurate. State law does provide for an employee to refute the information which is included in the discipline, and it is not an uncommon practice for employees to write their own version of a discipline and have that attached to their discipline and have that as part of the record as well. That would go forward in the event of a suspension to the board or to the committee or the independent hearing officer.
Okay, so under the amendment, then, any change the committee made, by action to remove the letter would then, I'm just referring to a letter here, would go to the dead discipline file, is what you're suggesting. All right. Supervisor Jeff Gentz on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will be supporting the amendment, as I was the one who voted no in the committee. While I listened intently and attempted to do everything I could for the employees, at some point we need to let management manage. And, you know, I just felt that this was just one layer of micromanagement that I didn't want to see. So that's my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Rose on the amendment.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would urge the board to oppose the amendment. I think what the committee crafted here and presents to you this evening is a good solution to this discipline problem. First of all, keep in mind that the current or the former procedure was that an employee could grieve any provision in the contract which was the subject of some sort of dispute. That was at the extreme end. Now all we've limited the grievance procedure to disciplinary issues and safety violations. So we're down to a very narrow area of discipline. All we are saying here is that the employee who receives a verbal or written reprimand has an opportunity for a due process hearing to the Finance and Administration Committee. That committee can make that hearing as long or as brief as they so choose. They don't have to go on for hours on a verbal or written reprimand. But it gives the employee an opportunity to present that discipline to the committee and ask for its reversal. The committee is not required to do so. We're not micromanaging, but what we are recognizing is that this is not private employment. This is public employment, and there is a substantial difference here. And that the due process rights which are applicable to public employment are, in most cases, not applicable to the private sector. And I think that's an important distinction that we need to keep in mind. We also need to keep in mind here that this type of discipline can affect somebody's employment opportunities in the future, their promotion ability, and does impact if there is some other kind of discipline during the requisite period of time, be it 6 months or a year. And while these letters may be removed from the employee's personnel file, they are not eradicated from the public record that is here with Kenosha County. And if the employee has no opportunity to appeal that, it stands. And the fact that the employee may have the right to present its side of his or her side of the story in the form of a written statement in contradiction to the disciplinary letter or oral reprimand, that is a pretty meager type of remedy. It still stands. Nobody has countermanded it. So what we have tried to do is to give some basic due process here on something that affects somebody's livelihood. This is the way that people make a living. These are non-management employees. And it seems to me that in basic fairness, they ought to be given that opportunity to present to a committee, Finance and Administration, their side of the story, and ask that that be reversed, because it does affect their ability to work. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Rose. Supervisor, let's see, Vice Chairman Eckerness on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We're talking about reprimands here, and usually that is a result of some sort of misconduct. But a supervisor has got a responsibility to be continually observing the employees that work for him and determining whether or not they're doing their work properly, whether they're being effective, whether they're being efficient, the type of job they're doing. And he's also got a responsibility for keeping a written record of this. If he sees problems, he should have counseling sessions with that person and explain the problems that he sees. And these should be written down as well. These aren't considered reprimands, but they are a part of that employee's work history. And that supervisor isn't doing his job unless he is doing or she is doing that kind of thing on a regular basis. Now, an employee might consider negative remarks in that as reprimands, and it's really not, but it would be the basis for further action should the employee become eligible for a reprimand or further discipline. You're talking about something here that can hamstring a supervisor's job to do his job effectively for us, because the most important commodity that we have to serve the public is the employees that we have, and our supervisors are charged with the responsibility of making sure that they are discharging their responsibilities in the most effective, efficient manner. I'm going to support this amendment, but we've got to be aware that there should be lots of written records about employee performance made by supervisors, and their supervisors making them about them. And we can't allow some of those things to be considered as reprimands. It's just, well, I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Clark on the amendment.
Yes, I just, to Mr. Riedel or the Corporation Counsel, Lorette, how are these, I guess I'll say, expired written or verbal reprimands used in management? Does management use them? Have they used them in the past? How do they use them once they expire?
I would like to dismiss the notion of promotion, because promotions were, at least up until tonight, a matter of seniority primarily, and so it would be wrong to say that they have been used for promotions in the past, at least not in my experience. In the event that there was a problem and we needed to establish a pattern of behavior, that is when they could emerge and become part of a record. In the past, that would have been an arbitration, and I'm trying to think of an occasion where specific action was, a serious action was being taken against an employee, and we could say that that employee had in fact been disciplined for a similar offense on multiple occasions over the course of 10 years.
How do you see using them in the future?
Well, the aspect that didn't exist prior to this and will exist now in the new world is a serious evaluation system, which was in some departments very seriously taken, and others not, because the employees got a promotion or an increase in wage simply through years of service by the contract. So when promotions are considered, clearly disciplines and evaluations by the manager, responses by the employees to those evaluations, because those are part of evaluations. Employees do respond to their evaluations. Employees can respond to the verbal reprimands, which we have already talked about. All of that would be considered if an employee was being considered for a promotion, for example.
So, just to be clear, verbal and written reprimands that are in the dead file would be used as consideration for a promotion.
They could. I'm sure that an evaluation would identify employees, but let's take tardiness. Say an employee has a chronic problem with tardiness, and the evaluation identified tardiness as being a problem. And the evaluations that would be reviewed for a potential promotion would identify the tardiness and likely identify the times of tardiness. And so although the specific document may be somewhere else, clearly an evaluation would identify by a specific line item in our evaluations tardiness as being something you'd evaluate. And to the extent that that affects the promotion, it would.
So tardiness is kind of a cut and dry thing. Whether you've were insubordinate may not be. I mean, that could be a subjective matter of opinion. So I just, those are all my comments. Thank you.
Mr. Riedel.
Yes.
For clarification on Supervisor Clark's question, why would a document that goes into a dead file, and the reason it gets to a dead file, I guess, would be twofold. One, because it's reached its expiration date.
Correct.
Under the, what is before this body tonight, it could also get to that dead file by action of the county board, or a county board committee.
According to the amendment they made the other night.
Would apparently deem that action inappropriate. So why would that document in a dead file be used for or against an employee?
Because I would, if I were the manager making an evaluation, an annual evaluation on an employee, and that employee had a tardiness issue in that year, it would be documented in the evaluation. And so when evaluations are used to assess the possibility of a promotion, it could be identified as an issue. Is it a barrier to promotion? If it
My
was
point
once,
is
probably
the
not.
committee has determined that it was an inappropriate discipline.
If the committee dismisses it at the committee level?
Yeah, it goes into the dead file.
It's gone. Right.
So that's the clarification I want to make sure is understood. So that document would not be used.
Right.
I don't know how you separate them, but maybe one's red, one's blue. I have no idea. Supervisor Elverman on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to vote against this amendment. Numerous reasons, but I can state the easiest one. For the 3 times that I've been on the administration committee, we've always had the grievance procedure as part of the committee structure. I remember nights where we had 5 or 6 grievances. It hasn't been a burden on anybody. It certainly didn't hamstring. I heard that word used, hamstring the administration, or hamstring supervisors in any way. That would be my first reason. This is something that's really not broken. And what we're trying to do is break down so much in these contracts. Our first step should be, and our real, the main reason that we're doing these things should be financial. I am very conservative as far as how I'm looking at these contracts, and I would never vote in anything here to add any financial burden to the county, because we've had financial burden given to us. I know firsthand, as chairman of the Highway and Parks, what we've been cut and what it's going to force us to do this year. So adding money is one thing, but breaking down people, and I know you can argue many ways that that hasn't been done. But from what we've all heard in this room, it has been done. These employees have been hammered and hammered and hammered, whether they are right or whether they're wrong. That's the way they feel. This is not a financial burden to the county. We've done this all along. I believe that an employee has a right to at least have the Finance and Administration Committee's response in that file, along with the reprimand. Sitting there naked and with just a response from the person that's been reprimanded wouldn't give me a real feeling of softness from the county. It is not going to burden the Finance and Administration Committee. I do not believe people are going to go running amok here. Hopefully, supervisors aren't going to be running amok, and hopefully the workers that are reprimanded aren't going to burden us. But I don't see this as a problem. I think we have to look, what we've been told and what we've been sold is that it's the financial burdens that we have to take care of. I don't think we have to break down our employees any further than that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I'm going to be voting against this specific amendment. I thought the committee did a pretty nice job of putting this together to safeguard the employees.
Thank you. Supervisor Clark.
After hearing all the debate here, I'm going to vote against the amendment. Number one, recognizing that this is a temporary policy. The administration does have more time to flesh this out. We have time to see whether it is a problem or it becomes a problem or how big of an issue it is. And really the key for me is if this can be used against them and affect their financial, it's progressive. As Supervisor Overman indicated, we have currently they could grieve pretty much anything and everything. We've really narrowed this down. I don't know that it's going to be a big issue. I'm willing to take that chance, and I'm willing to revisit this issue when the next policy comes out. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no lights, before you is amendment under the written reprimand section. I don't have page numbers, so under written reprimand, the language in red about 2/3 of the way down the sheet. The amendment before you is to strike that language, correct? All appeal procedure for verbal and written reprimands. Everyone clear on that? All right. On the issue of amending the appeal procedure for verbal and written reprimands as amended, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Well, let's do a roll call. I want to make sure you guys are clear on what you're voting on.
I thought you were a little unclear. The motion is to strike that. I thought you were a little unclear, perhaps.
Correct, to strike the language. All right, if you are in favor of striking the language, you will vote P and plus. That is the amendment. If you are in favor of keeping the language as written before you, it's P and minus. The amendment fails 24-4. The substitute resolution remains as presented under the appeal procedure for verbal and written reprimands. You good? All right, before you now is the substitute policy resolution 1 as amended with the language relative to equalizing overtime. Anyone on Supervisor Noble?
Yeah, I only have actually one question, and The employee health benefit section is totally untouched, and I do believe there's some significant savings for the taxpayer in there. When are we going to address that? For example, you know, everybody knows I've been for 6 years arguing against, and I've voted against many contracts because of it, for that county contribution for flex accounts, $400 single, $800 family, and there's other things that we can do now that we don't have to have collective bargaining.
Mr. Riedel, would you like to address that?
The county executive has put together a group of employees who are doing a complete rework of the health plan, which will be introduced later in the year. For the purpose of these two contracts, because they expire in mid-year, we brought these contracts to where all the rest of the employees are, which what we call is the G plan. The aim will be to get all the employees on the same plan and then morph into the amended plan.
So in the beginning of 2012?
Yes.
The new budget?
Yes.
Is that what you're saying? Okay, thank you.
Supervisor Singer.
Thank you, Chairman. I pressed my button to call the question, but I'm not going to call the question because I want to be able to say to the Chairman of the Finance that he did an excellent job of putting this together. There was so many concerns that needed to be addressed by not only the supervisors, but also the employees, and I'm sure there was concerns that were expressed by the administration. I just want to give kudos to the chairman for being open-minded. He saved this body over 4 to 5 hours in deliberations, and I think he deserves. Thank you.
I want to thank you for not calling the question, because at the last meeting when there were certain members missing, we opted to go a different route. So let's give all who need the opportunity to debate it a chance to debate it. So thank you. Seeing no other lights, is there any further discussion on Policy Resolution 1 with the singular amendment that is before you, which I will read? There's a roll call requested. The amendment under overtime, second paragraph, which is in red, states Kenosha County will continue its practice of attempting to, is what is added, equalize rather than equalizing overtime annually, is the word added, based on years of service, etc. That is the amendment to the substitute resolution. If you're in favor, no, sir. No. This is now on the policy as, the substitute policy as amended. If you're in favor, P and plus. If you're opposed, P and minus. I did not close discussion. None of you had any inclination of continuing to discuss. I asked. I'm doing my best to make it clear where we're moving next. P and plus if you're in favor, P and minus if you're opposed. Motion carries 27-1.
Policy Resolution 2 from Finance Administration Committee, a resolution to establish interim employment policies for employees employed by the Kenosha County Sheriff's Department Corrections Division. Clark, yes. O'Day, Clark, no. O'Day, yes. Gens, yes. Eckerness, yes. Rose, no. Singer, excused. Grady, excused.
Supervisor Clark, are you handling this?
I move policy resolution number 2.
Policy Resolution number 2, moved by Clark, seconded by O'Day. Supervisor Clark.
Mr. Chairman, if there is no objection from the county board, I would ask that I don't want to assume anything. I'm going to, if there's no objection, I would like to substitute the resolution.
Same procedure as the previous policy resolution. Is there any objection to offering the substitute resolution? Seeing none, motion to substitute made by Supervisor Clark, second again by Supervisor Holman. Supervisor Clark.
Mr. Chairman, I've went through the details of both policies. I indicated that on your desk was a revised one compared to the one that was in your packet. It should be dated August 23rd, 2001. On the bottom, I have been instructed by the Corporation Counsel's Office that the only change to this document compared to the one that has been in your was in your packet is on it appears to be page 4 of the Kenosha County Discipline Policy and Grievance Procedure, and it changed these. The only change is the suspension of, and we struck the 2, and we changed it to a 1 or more working days. So that allows employees that are suspended for 1 or more days to follow the independent hearing officer appeal procedure. That's the only change. The only issue that I believe is out there is the FLSA and the 171 hours as opposed to the 160 hours. As I mentioned earlier, the FLSA, the savings attributable to the FLSA 171 hours versus 160 hours is $165,254. The per person savings previously on highway was $1,667. On jail, it was $1,857 with that change in there. The administration, if the county board decides to go with the 160-hour standard, they would prefer, rather than if there is an amendment or someone decides that they want to do that, that we really are going to go with a 40-hour work week, very similar to Highway 70, where it's paid time off over 40 hours, and we're on a 40-hour work week. It's much easier to manage. I'm not going to make that amendment. I'm going to ask Mr. Riedel if he could at least discuss FLSA and the 171 hours and any thoughts that he may have on it, and after that I will yield the floor.
Mr. Chairman, may I ask Mr. Gertson to join me as well?
Sure.
Thank you.
Yes.
In the 60s and 70s, the Fair Labor Standards Act began to apply to public employees. And as the Fair Labor Standards of the federal government analyzed the work that various employees did and the uniqueness of the work they did apply different standards, in particular to 2 areas. One was law enforcement, and the other was medical care. You'll note that both of those are 24/7 operations generally, and the Fair Labor Standards Act provides for different formulae for those 2 areas of work. And so the protecteds do have the opportunity or do have the option of working 171 hours over a 28-day cycle. Now, Kenosha County has used the 28-day cycle for many years, but as you know, we have paid time and a half for all time over 8. In the budget repair bill, this is an opportunity for us to save money on the budget and going to the FLSA overtime. So the federal government, in effect, recognizes protected service, and in particular corrections officers for our purposes, as being unique because of the 24/7 operation that they work. They are also unique in the fact that the opportunity for overtime is significant and significantly higher for other employees for whom the standard is over 40 hours. And that's why there is a difference there. And the reason I've asked Mr. Gertson to join me here is because Mr. Gertson did do an analysis of the savings and is prepared to discuss that with you if that is okay with the chairman.
Okay with me.
Thank you.
we use 2010 as the basis for the calculation, and we actually put the full year for the jailers up on the spreadsheet. And looking at that, if we went to the proposal, the FLSA, we would save about $70,000 in overtime by not paying the double time. About $61,000 if we paid for time worked versus time paid. It's my understanding that the proposal before you does pay on time paid, so we wouldn't garner that savings. But the largest savings comes from the 171-hour schedule. That's $165,000. So using the FLSA standard, we would save $297,000 if you adopted that on the time paid versus the time worked. You would subtract $61,000 from the savings, so you'd save about $230,000.
Can you clarify for the board the policy as amended? What is the savings you're referring to?
I'll ask Bob to double check on this, but my understanding is the policy before you pays the FLSA 171 hours, with the exception that it's based on time paid, not time worked. So they would get credit for benefit time. Is that accurate?
All right, so the number you're talking about is the 297 minus the 61.
Right. That's the savings that we would get for one full year if you adopt this policy.
So somewhere in the ballpark of $236,000 is what the proposed savings is with the policy as amended at the Finance Administration last week, correct?
Correct.
Point of information.
Per employee, we would save about $1,800 on a per employee basis. Now that includes all benefit costs. That includes the taxes that the employee would pay and the FICA that they would pay on any overtime costs.
Thank you. State your point.
Just from the analysis that I saw earlier, the savings on the 171 is $165,000. There was $70,000 that savings that had to do with the elimination of double time. Dave?
That's correct. Yeah, $70,000 on the elimination of the double time, and a little over $160 on the 171 7K. So those two added together is what we would save for a year.
And those who think I ask questions because I'm trying to steer debate, none of what I just heard now adds up to $297,000, whether I include or exclude 67,000, so or 61,000. So what exactly, for the board's information, what numbers are we talking about here?
The three pieces, let me just add them to be sure. The savings from the double time is $70,000. The savings from the going from time paid versus time worked is $60,000, so that those two sum to $130, and then $160 sums to, is $165 actually is the savings from the going to the 7K 171 hours. That's $297, and I did round a little bit, so that's the other $2,000.
I'm good with your rounding, you know that. So what of the three numbers, what is included in the policy as amended by the Finance and Administration Committee last week?
The $70,000 savings from the double time,
right, and
the $165,000 savings from the 7K 171-hour schedule.
So approximately $225,000. No. Yeah, $235,000.
$235.
That is your number. Clear? Thank you, Mr. Gertz. Supervisor Michael.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a couple of questions. With the 171 hours within the 28-day period, it just doesn't seem that it's equitable, and we voted previously on the highway department with their overtime, and one of the phrases or one of the terms that was used was regarding protective servants. But these individuals are not protective servants, because if they were, they'd be excluded, because we wouldn't be allowed to, I mean, we'd still be able to bargain with them. So, I mean, it's somewhat unique with the terminology that's being used and stated when we talk about the jailers. I mean, it's somewhat of a, I mean, I guess it's somewhat puzzling, because we want to say they're protective servants, so they're a 24-hour-a-day operation, but then we're saying we're not going to protect them because they're not protective servants. I guess I have a real hard time with this 171 hours. I personally think it should be back to 160 hours, and then overtime gets kicked in. I guess I don't think we're treating them fairly. I don't think it's right, and I have a real problem with it. So, I mean, I can't support this amendment. And I'd actually want to make an amendment to the amendment.
There is no amendment before you, just so you know.
Okay.
It's the policy, the substitute policy resolution. So if you're inclined to make an amendment, that's fine. You made a statement you can't support the amendment, and there isn't one
Okay, I
before.
apologize. At this time, I would be making an amendment to change the 171 to 160 hours.
Motion made by Supervisor Michael to change the 171-hour threshold to 160. Someone over here seconded it first. I believe it was Supervisor Zerbon.
Point of information.
State your point.
I would just ask that this amendment be, if you're going to do it this way and you're looking for equity, that it be based on a 40-hour work week at this point in time, rather than a 28-day period at 160 hours. Administration said that would be easier for them to manage, and it puts them in the exact same position.
I appreciate the point. I will leave that up to the maker of the motion and his second.
I have no problem with it changing that terminology.
All right. Because I don't do this job full-time, I'm going to need some help finding the exact spot in the policy. You can all point amongst yourselves. Someone needs to get up there.
Can we answer Supervisor Michael's question?
Sure.
He asked the question about the difference between protected.
No, I just said I made a statement. I said we consider them to be protective servants, but they're not.
It's my understanding the federal government recognizes them as protective. The state does not. All right, so we are looking on page 3 under overtime. Where it states 1.5 their normal pay rate for all hours of work and mandatory school appearances that exceed we had this discussion in committee. Is it a straight 40 hours a week? Is the verbiage change, Supervisor Clark?
It's it would be to really emulate or follow what we're doing with Highway 70, which is benefit time counts for the 40, and on Highway 70, in their overtime provision, it says the employee supervisor must approve all overtime prior to the employee working overtime. All non-exempt employees will be paid 1.5 times their regular rate of pay for all hours worked in excess of 40 hours in one work week. I would just suggest, for simplicity, and if the administration can comment on this, that they adopt the 40-hour rule, substitute it or amend it so it's similar to the Highway 70, except for the mandatory overtime provision, because the jail has their own paramilitary rules anyways.
Mr. Riedel. I trust the administration can make that adjustment in the policy.
Procedurally, it is to the advantage of the payroll operation to do exactly what Supervisor Clark said. Were you to amend the 171 over 28 days to the intent, which is 160, it is more efficient for the payroll staff if, in fact, rather than 160 over 28 days, it was overtime after 40. Right?
And that's what it says in the Highway 70.
Correct.
So if we follow the same verbiage, that's the intent of the maker of the resolution, or the
Understood.
maker of the amendment.
Correct. Second is comfortable with that? All right, thank you. On the substituted resolution with the amendment relative to overtime, Supervisor Singer on the amendment.
Thank you, Chairman. Through the chair, I'd like to ask David Gertzen some questions.
Mr. Gertzen.
At the committee level, we asked for an explanation on the 171. You gave us a nice breakdown of the cost structure of it, which is fine and dandy, but we wanted to know the 171 and how it affects their overtime. And I guess my question to you is, at 171, does the employee, a jail employee, does he get paid after 40 hours? Does he get paid overtime?
If you adopt the 171 hours, they would not. Currently, they're getting paid.
Under that 171 hours, basically, when do they get overtime, and how many more hours do they work on an annualized basis, or even a monthly basis, or a 28-day period? According to this, how many more hours would they have to work in order to get overtime like their fellow employees over at the highway department?
171 minus 160, or 11 more hours in a 4-week cycle.
Okay.
If you do it by week, in 40 hours, it would be about 2.75 hours, although the FLSA, if you do it by a week, allows you to go to 43 hours.
Okay, that's it. I won't ask anything else.
Mr. Gertzen, you said 11 hours over a 4-week period?
Yeah, it would be
I just
171 compared to 160.
You tailed off. I didn't hear the.
Sorry.
So I believe it comes out to about 143 hours in annualized, assuming that they don't, they have to reach that for every 28-day period, if my numbers are correct on my calculator. So, I just think if we don't do something, we're creating a subclass of employees than what we just approved with policy resolution number 1. So that's why I had thought the 160, and that's why I asked that in committee, is, well, why is it 171? I mean, why isn't it 160? Because that makes a heck of a lot more sense. And nobody could really answer why they put 171, except they could. And again, it gets back to, do we need to do something just because we can do it? And, I know there's also a need there on a fiscal note, and that's one of the driving factors, but do we need to keep our employees on a level ground, I believe. We don't need, and say, well, this class of employee, whatever, or that, they're jailers, and we're making money off of jailers, or we're not, or we're making money off the highway, so we treat them different. I don't think that argument flies in the face of anything. I think we need to treat all our employees the same, and I guess my only other question would be to Bob, because he wants to say it anyway, is what this question or statement that was brought up by our chairman of the Judiciary and Law, and I'm on that committee as well. What is it really a protected class, or is it not a protected class?
Federal.
Yeah, I would like to, through the chair, I'd like Bob to answer that.
Federal government recognizes them as a protected class. State does not. State statute does not. That's the answer.
And it's a federal law. So for the purpose of explanation and for the purpose of the FLSA, they are protected. In our state, they can be civilian, and ours out.
Okay. So it's a difference between federal and state, and neither one of the laws counteract the other one. So, all right, thank you.
Supervisor Elverman on the amendment.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think Mr. Riedler and Mr. Gersten will probably gonna have to get back up there. I just have a question on the change here. If this gets changed to a 40-hour work week, how much money do we lose from the savings that we were going to be discussing?
Sorry. Yes.
165,000 would be the you would eliminate that from the savings that we would get, or reduce the amount of savings by 165. So of the 270, 290, you would lose about 160, 170 of it from this change.
Okay, but we weren't talking about 290. We were talking about 235.
Right.
So of the 235, the change between the document I have in front of me and if it gets changed here to a 40-hour work week.
Yeah. Of the 235, you lose 165 of the 235.
165.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Hold on. With all due respect, Mr. Gertzen, you made two statements. One, we saved 165 off the 297, and then when questioned again, you said we saved 165 off the 235.
Right.
That's the true one.
The second one is the correct answer?
Yeah, the first one I was looking at the total FLSA, comparing to the total FLSA. The second one I was comparing to the proposal before you. That eliminates the time worked piece and substitute time paid.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, go ahead.
That's all I needed to know, Mr. Chairman.
Supervisor Noble on the amendment.
I had the same question as Supervisor Elverman, but so the only savings is just for one clarification for my own mind. The only savings then would be the 70,000 double time.
Right. The only savings we would get is from the elimination of the double time, $70,000.
I'm in favor of this because I think we're sort of like, it's double jeopardy for that protected class. The state passed this law that protects the protected class, but yet we can kind of like pile on because the federal law says we can do what we almost are doing here with 171 hours. So I guess I agree with Supervisor Singer. Just because we can do it, we don't have to do it. We need to be consistent and fair with all of our employees.
Thank you. Supervisor Clark.
The only question or thought I have, and this might be a question to the Chief Deputy, if we're on a 40-hour work week versus a 4-week cycle, whether it's 171 or not, does that have any bearing or any impact on your contemplating schedule changes and ability to do it in 2012?
Supervisor Clark, at this point I don't know, because we haven't implemented the schedule changes and we're still in planning it, so we'd have to take it back and look at it. I can only tell you that whatever the board decides on this, it's probably going to impact us in some way when it comes to a permanent schedule change or what the sheriff deems to do. So we'd have to study it and see what had any impact on it.
Okay, thank you. And maybe that's a, you know, there certainly is an issue of an inequity here with the employees. Maybe when they get to the more permanent policy and they're considering the 2012 budget, they may need to consider that. And frankly, if they came up and said, we think we should really be at 171 because it's going to allow us scheduling flexibility and all those various different items. I know there's an issue with how the jailers, whether their compensation is even adequate. Maybe right now it is, but there is a period of time where they're having significant amount of turnover, and when we get to an economy again, what's going to happen with turnover? And I would much rather, personally, I'd much rather give them the dollars in their base and get the scheduling if it allowed us to have that flexibility of scheduling in the future. I just throw that out for comment. In the short term, I may support this, but I think it's something that's going to need to be revisited for the 2012 budget and understand how it really impacts scheduling. Just a question real quick to Mr. Riedel. Can there be compensation changes to the this class of employee under Act 10?
Mr. Riedel.
The union will have to establish itself through vote, and if it does, then it will be the union's primary job to negotiate wages going forward. And it is a process of negotiation, as it always has been, absent all the other peripheral stuff. So it's just base wages.
Okay, thank you.
But there's a limitation. Okay, that's the rest of the story.
Yeah, just finish the point. The most we can raise wages, if the union exists, is CPI.
Anything else?
No, thanks.
Thank you. Supervisor Grady.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If the attempt on this is really to make it some degree of parity to what Local 70 has, are we really, in effect, trying to modify this document before us to say 40 hours in a 7-day period? Isn't that indeed what the Local 70 has in terms of their modification? If so, I would like to hear comment from both Chief Deputy and Mr. Riedel as to the appropriateness of this from a scheduling standpoint.
Gentlemen.
I'm not quite sure I understand what you're asking for.
If we're talking about overtime commencing for 990, anything over 40 hours in a 7-day period, can you comment on how that affects your schedule?
Well, I don't know how it's going to affect the schedule per se, but I know that it would definitely affect the employee. In other words, instead of having to work 11 hours straight time after 171 hours of work in community before they're eligible for time and a half, at least they'll get some more credible compensation, excuse me. Because I've been listening to all the arguments and the debate on this, and of course the original thing that the sheriff wanted was anything paid over 8 hours, and he wanted to keep that, and I agreed with him on that because it bases it on keeping the employees wanting to work. We have a lot of forced overtime, and it's because we have fixed post positions that need to be filled with accident, sickness, workman's compensation, vacations, casual day usage, and you name it. A lot of areas become open, and we always have a lot of shortages of personnel. That way, there's always a lot of forced overtime. Nobody likes to be forced, but if you got to be forced overtime, you at least like to be able to be compensated for it on an immediate basis and not wait till you accumulate 171 hours worth. How would it affect? That would be a compromise. It would go to a 40-hour platform, but it would not affect the scheduling much per se, but at least they would get compensated at a quicker rate than having to work to 171.
So what you're saying, that's a middle ground somewhere between 8 hours per day and the 171 for 28 days. This is somewhat of a middle ground if it were to be 40 hours in a 7-day time period. Is that correct?
In our opinion, it would be. We understand the administration's concern about the money. It's not we're trying to deny that, but we're also trying to run a two-facility operation with over about 180 employees.
Thank you.
And we want to keep them working.
Okay. And Mr. Riedel's comment, please.
Same question?
Same question.
It does limit the opportunity for creative scheduling. The 171 over 28 days actually encourages creative scheduling, to be truthful, because we are not limited by that, by that parameter. It's 43 hours a week to gain overtime under the FLSA. I believe, and Dave would have to verify this, that the contribution made by the overtime changes to Local 70 was somewhere in the neighborhood of $1,600 1664, and the contribution made by employees of the jail is comparable to that by accepting the 171 over 28. And Dave would have to verify the numbers. But if you looked at it that way, the contribution by these employees, the give back in effect, is the same. And so that's why the administration has considered this as part of its overall budget repair plan.
Answers my question. Thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor, we're going to go to Kubicki. We haven't heard from him yet. Supervisor
Thank
Kubicki.
you, Mr. Chairman. I didn't lose my voice yet. I want to thank Supervisor Michael for bringing this adopted point forward with having the idea of the 40-hour work week and getting paid overtime after the 40. I believe it's simple to realize it's just an equity issue, and I think this is a step in the right direction. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Now back to Supervisor Clark.
I'll be real brief. I just want to pass along what Sheriff Beth said in the committee meeting when he was saying if we got to more than 8 hours a day, or we're doing at 40, that he's going to find the savings in his budget to pay for it. I'm going to hold him to the $165,000.
Thank you. I have no other lights on the board. What we were debating right now is the change in the overtime policy to eliminate the 171 over 28 and go with a 40-hour work week, similar to what we did in the local 70 contract. So before you, roll call vote is the amendment on overtime. Nothing more. If you're in favor of the amendment to go to 40 hours, P and plus. If you're opposed, P and minus. Supervisor, there we go. Motion carries 26-2. All right, before you is the substitute policy resolution 2 with the singular amendment on overtime. Correct? Singular amendment on overtime. Let me just make sure here. I believe that's all we've amended. Any discussions? Supervisor Zerban.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. It's more of a point of information, so if I may, through the chair to Mr. Riedel.
Mr. Riedel.
Thanks. We've had lots of conversations about how to address lots of employment issues moving forward in the absence of collective bargaining and contracts with the union. One of the things that we've not discussed, and I've not heard any kind of comment on, is what will actually be the criteria, aside from employee evaluations and recommendations of supervisors, what will be the criteria for advancement in the different departments?
At the risk of sounding trite, it's going to be interest. You
said interest?
Interest on the part of the line employee to move into the non-represented category. Through no action of their own, corrections officers will become non-represented probably in just a few minutes. But it is the difference between what a corrections supervisor gets paid, who does not earn overtime, okay, balanced against a corrections professional who was formerly represented and still can earn a significant amount of overtime. If we have any single problem that really affects our ability to promote people into the rank of either corporal or sergeant, we have both in the lineup for the sheriff's department. It's the inability to earn what the line employee can earn. And so with the overtime, under whatever circumstance, the employees of 990J have a far greater earnings potential than their supervisors. Now, fortunately, we have been able to attract some supervisors, and they're very, very good. And so we will continue to try and make those jobs attractive through their pay structures and their benefit structures, so that we can, in fact, attract good promotions. Beyond that, it is the evaluations that will drive that.
Well, my question, I guess, more, I think we need some clarification, some policies and procedures in place that are going to govern how this is done. I would like to see coming forth from the administration with permanent procedures, perhaps how the evaluation of employees is weighted. You know, what criteria is a basis for advancement over somebody else? You know, there can't be just this subjective, arbitrary advancement. I mean, I want to see from, you know, we're looking at every aspect through policies, which by no fault of our own we must do and need to address, and I would like to see how determinations are going to be made in the future in the different departments with respect to advancement opportunities of the employees.
Understood.
So that it's fair and unbiased.
Understood.
Thank you.
Thank you. I have no other lights on the board. What is before us is Policy Resolution 2, the substitution to Policy Resolution 2 with the singular amendment relative to the 40-hour overtime work week. Everyone's clear on that? So before you is the resolution with amendment. P and plus if you are in favor as amended, P and minus if you are opposed. Motion carries 28-0. On that, one final comment. Supervisor Arrington, that isn't the final comment, by the way, mine is. Supervisor Arrington.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to change my vote on policy number 1. I felt that when I reviewed these two things based on policy number 2, it was at 171, and I was not going to support 2. But now that the overtime is fair for our Kenosha County employees, I would like to change my vote for policy 1 to agree with the rest of the board.
In all honesty, I anticipated you had an issue there. Is there an objection from the board for the record to note that Supervisor Arrington in fact voted in the positive and the affirmative to Policy Resolution 1? Hearing no objection, the record will so note. Now my final comment. We had 2 policies passed this evening. We now know 28-0, which we all recognize would not have been the case 2 weeks ago. While I don't support the approach 2 weeks ago, I want to point out what this body can do if we don't all expect someone else to do the heavy lifting. What transpired, there was plenty of opportunity to discuss this. The Chairman of Finance asked repeatedly for input, discussion, and feedback on these policies. And it wasn't until the issues got to the county board floor where there was a sense of panic because not all had been involved in the process early enough. If we do the heavy lifting individually, collectively, when these issues come forward, it'll be a much more seamless, harmonious approach and solution to what we have to do. I again want to thank the administration as well as our employees, Supervisor Clark, the entire Finance and Administration Committee. Recognize that this issue is only dead now for a couple of months. The permanent policies will be back before this board. Let's get involved early and come forward with a solution that we believe is going to be supported by the full board. So I thank you all for your discussion and your debate this evening. Clerk.
Resolution 43 from the Executive Committee regarding National Loss Mitigation Standard. Molinaro, yes. Akernis, yes. Clark, yes. Alberman, yes. Michael, yes. Noble, yes. Brunig, yes.
All right, 2 things. I'm going to defer both of these next 2 resolutions to Supervisor Hallman. More importantly, we have the signature page that was not at the Executive Committee meeting. You'll need to come up and sign after the meeting for those 7 members. With that, Supervisor Hallman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If I could, I'd like to move them as a package. Move 43 and 44.
I'll have the clerk read the second one.
Resolution 44 from the Executive Committee regarding Wisconsin Loss Mitigation Standard. Molinaro, yes. Eckerness, yes. Clark, yes. Elverman, yes. Michael, yes. Noble, yes. Brunig, yes.
Supervisor Hallman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Fellow members, what you have in front of you is something that I've been discussing and bringing up over the last couple of months. 43 basically asks the 50 attorney generals who have filed a suit against some of the major Wall Street banking firms.
Motion by Supervisor Hallman, second by Supervisor Clark. Supervisor Hallman, I'm sorry.
It's okay. Where was I? Thank you.
I didn't know where I was either, so.
That's right. I apologize. I'm very under the weather.
My fault. Go ahead.
You have them before you, and I'm here to take questions. Thank you.
Supervisor Hallman, before we see if there's questions, you had an amendment you wanted to make for clarification purposes?
Yes. I made a small mistake in drafting 43. You'll notice in paragraph 5 where it says, therefore be it resolved, the third line where it says suit against should actually be changed and amended to settlement with. So I'd like to make a motion to amend suit against and change it to settlement with.
Supervisor Hallman, repeat again what paragraph that is, please.
It would be paragraph 5 on resolution number 43 in the third line where it says suit against, changed to settlement with.
Amendment proposed by Supervisor Hallman, seconded by Supervisor Clark. Any discussion on the amendment? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? Amendment carries. On the resolution 43 and 44 as amended, we'll take them individually. Is there any further discussion on 43? Seeing none, all those in favor of 43 as amended signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, motion carries. Resolution 44, no amendment, correct? As presented, all those any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, motion carries. Remember, Executive Committee to come up and sign this after the meeting, please.
Communications from Georgie Melcher regarding future items scheduled before the Planning, Development, and Extension Education Committee.
Refer to Planning, Development, and Extension Education Committee.
Claims, Terry Smart, vehicle damage.
Go ahead and read all 12.
Hog Heaven Bar, wire damage by plow truck. Herbert Quaid, denied medication while incarcerated. Esmeralda Sepulveda, Veda, Felling Courthouse restroom.
Claims 9 through 12 referred to Corporation Council.
Approval of the August 2nd, 2011 minutes by Supervisor Johnson.
Supervisor Johnson. Motion to approve minutes by Supervisor Johnson, second by Supervisor Michael. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Motion carries. Motion adjourned by Supervisor Michael, second by Supervisor Elverman. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, we're adjourned. Thank you again.